If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 191, Shadows on the Hogwarts Express. The bustling platform 9/3 was a sea of nervous energy as students and parents alike whispered about the recent Azkaban breakout. Harry weaved through the crowd and entered the Hogwarts Express to search for his friends. As he slid open the compartment door, he was greeted by the sight of his friends, several of whom were proudly displaying their new prefect badges. Cedric for Hufflepuff, Roger for Ravenclaw, Elvinia for Slytherin, and Alicia representing Gryffindor. Their animated conversation halted as Harry entered. Well, Harry drawled, a mischievous glint in his eye. Looks like we've got a right bunch of goody two-shoes here. I do hope you'll turn a blind eye to my late-night strolls. For old time's sake, of course. Alicia shot him a mock-stern look. Dream on, Potter. If anything, we'll be keeping an extra close eye on you now. Speaking of which, Roger chimed in, why aren't you the Ravenclaw prefect instead of me? I thought the professors had made a mistake when I received this badge in my mail. Harry shrugged. Professor Flitwick did offer me the role, but I declined. Don't have the time for it with my apprenticeship and everything. While Harry did not want to be a prefect, he would still fight for the head boy position. That came with special benefits he couldn't ignore. Prefects just got a prefect bathroom for all the trouble they had to deal with. Smart move, Roger sighed. I'm already dreading the first year herding and midnight patrols. Owl year is going to be brutal enough as it is. Elvinia's face darkened. Count your blessings, Davies. At least you're not stuck with Warrington as your counterpart. Cedric, ever the optimist, clapped Harry on the shoulder. Come on, it's not all bad. Being a prefect is a chance to make the first years feel at home, just like our prefects did for us. Remember how lost we all were? His eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. Anyway, we should head to the prefect meeting. Duty calls. Harry couldn't help but grin at Cedric's unwavering positivity. Go on then, golden boy. Go forth and illuminate the lives of those poor, lost children with your dazzling charm. Just try not to blind them with that badge, will you? The group laughed, the banter lightening the mood. As his friends moved towards the prefect's carriage, Harry felt a curious mix of relief and a slight twinge of regret. He knew he'd made the right choice, but there was an undeniable allure to leadership roles. Shaking off the thought, he settled in with the remaining non-prefects. Reggie broke the silence. So, Harry, what's your take on the coming year? Harry's expression turned grim. Brace yourselves for a gloomy one. We're hosting some happiness-sucking creatures this year at Hogwarts. Arabella frowned. I don't know what the Ministry is thinking. I know there are some dangerous convicts on the run, but wouldn't some Aurors patrolling the grounds have been a better option? I don't see any way in which Dementors would prove useful other than making this year gloomy. Angelina nodded. Well, at least the new Dada professor is supposed to be competent. Might balance out some of the gloom. The conversation drifted to lighter topics as the train chugged northward. However, as the sky darkened and rain began to pelt the windows, an unnatural chill crept through the air. The train began to slow, then came to a grinding halt. And if that was not enough, all the lamps went out and plunged the train into total darkness. Harry tensed, knowing what was coming. Reggie asked nervously, why has the train stopped? And why are the lights out? He had his wand out with a Lumos charm lighting up the compartment. Harry stood up. I'll check. You guys stay in the compartment. Without waiting for their response, Harry slid the compartment door open, went out, and shut the door behind him. Although Harry knew this was going to happen, he had a bad feeling which was not good. He needed to make sure everything was safe. The corridor was a black void, but Harry could sense the approaching malevolence. A towering, hooded figure glided towards him, its rattling breath filling the air with dread. As the Dementor loomed closer, Harry felt the cold seep into his bones. Distant screams echoed in his mind, his grandmother's sacrifice, the miserable days at the Dursleys. But Harry steeled himself, focusing on the warmth of his chosen family. Expecto Patronum! He roared. A brilliant, silver Thunderbird erupted from his wand, its wingspan filling the corridor. It charged at the Dementor, driving it back with a screech. The creature fled, and warmth began to return to the air. However, things were not over yet. Harry could hear screams from across the train. It looked like a lot of Dementors had boarded the train. With more fugitives having escaped recently, it seemed the Dementors were more agitated and aggressive in their search. Harry knew he had to act quickly. He made a split-second decision and headed for the nearest exit. Opening the door, he climbed onto the roof of the train, rain pelting his face and wind whipping around him. From his elevated position, Harry could see dark, hooded figures moving through different parts of the train. He raised his wand once more, focusing on his happiest memories. "Expecto Patronum!" he shouted, his voice carrying over the howling wind. The silver Thunderbird burst forth again, this time even larger and more radiant. Harry directed it to sweep through the entire train, from one end to the other. The Patronus phased through the roof, its brilliant light visible through the windows as it drove out the Dementors car by car. Students pressed their faces to the glass, watching in awe as the silver bird chased away the darkness. The Dementors fled, screeching as they were forced out of the train and into the stormy night. With the immediate threat gone, Harry carefully made his way back inside the train. As he re-entered, he found himself surrounded by awestruck faces, including his prefect friends. "Merlin's beard, Harry," Roger breathed. "That was incredible." "A corporeal Patronus," Cedric added, shaking his head in disbelief. "And a magical creature at that. How on earth did you manage it?" Harry shrugged, trying to downplay his feat. "I've been practicing over the summer. With the Dementors coming to Hogwarts, I thought it might be useful." Before anyone could question him further, another person came into the train carriage. It was Remus Lupin, his wand out and a concerned expression on his face. "Is everyone all right in here? I felt the presence of a powerful Patronus." His eyes landed on Harry, a flicker of recognition. "We're fine, Professor," Harry said calmly. "The Dementors gone now." Lupin nodded, handing out chocolate to everyone. "Eat this, it helps." "That was very impressive spell work, Mr. Potter. Not many grown wizards can produce a Patronus like that." Harry just nodded. He did not want to talk more with Lupin. Truth be told, Lupin was one character of the Harry Potter world that, while many people liked, he did not. In Harry's eyes, Lupin was a study in contradictions. A man capable of great kindness, yet plagued by a crippling cowardice. In the canon, he had abandoned the infant Harry after James and Lily's death, hiding behind his condition rather than stepping up as a surrogate uncle. For 13 years, he had made no effort to contact Harry, only to suddenly appear as a teacher, maintaining a dispassionate professional distance. Harry's mind raced through the future he knew, never meeting the canon Harry except for order duties. Eventual marriage to Tonks and even then attempting to run away and abandon her and their unborn child. Each choice seemed to Harry a reflection of a man who allowed fear to dictate his actions, who drowned in self-pity rather than rising above his circumstances. The werewolf curse was undoubtedly a heavy burden, but it only affected Lupin for a few days each month. The rest of the time, he was fully human, capable of living a normal life if he chose to fight for it. Harry couldn't help but think that if he had been reborn as a werewolf, he would have strived to master the condition, to find ways to control the transformation, rather than letting it control him. So Harry kept his interaction with Lupin brief and impersonal. He turned away, making his way back to his compartment where his friends waited, their faces a mix of awe and curiosity. He knew he'd have some explaining to do, but for now, he was content in the knowledge that no one was hurt from the Dementors' entry into the train. The train resumed its journey, and as they neared Hogwarts, Harry couldn't help but wonder what other surprises this year would bring. With Harry expecting the year to be a little different from the canon, he was not expecting a calm owl year. Chapter 192, The New School Year. As Harry stepped onto the Hogsmeade station, his two-way mirror that connected to Sirius buzzed. Seeking privacy, he slipped away from the crowd of chattering students and found a quiet corner to answer the call. Sirius's face appeared in the mirror, his expression a mix of relief and pride. "Harry. Are you all right? I heard about what happened on the Hogwarts Express." Harry nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "I'm fine, Padfoot. Just another day in the life of Harry Potter." Sirius chuckled, but his eyes were serious. "You've awed a lot of people tonight, pup. Producing a Patronus that drove away 10 Dementors? That's no small feat." After lavishing more praise on his godson, Sirius's tone turned grave. "There's something you need to know, Harry. While most people are singing your praises, the Minister of Magic isn't one of them. Fudge wanted you tried for interfering with the Dementor's search." Harry's eyebrows shot up. "Tried? For protecting students?" Sirius nodded grimly. But don't worry. Amelia and I weren't about to let that happen. We contacted the parents of various influential Hogwarts students and told them what had transpired. They were horrified to learn their children had been subjected to an unmonitored search by a dozen Dementors. If you hadn't acted. He trailed off, shaking his head. Long story short, the parents' outrage forced Fudge to back down. In fact, Sirius continued, a mischievous glint in his eye, they've given you carte blanche to act without worry when it comes to the Dementors. They're grateful for what you did and have promised to handle any fallout if you need to drive away Dementors in the future. You're in the clear, pup. Harry felt a wave of relief wash over him. Thanks, Sirius. I appreciate you and Amelia having my back. Always, Harry. Now, you'd better get going before you miss the feast. We'll talk soon. As the mirror went dark, Harry realized the platform had nearly emptied. He hurried towards the carriages, hoping his friends had saved him a seat as he'd asked. The Great Hall buzzed with excitement as Harry slipped into his seat at the Ravenclaw table. The sorting ceremony was already underway, and Harry watched with interest as the new first years were sorted. Only one name caught his attention this year, Astoria Greengrass, who was promptly sorted into Slytherin. She beamed as she joined her sister at the Slytherin table. After the sorting, Dumbledore rose to address the school. His blue eyes, usually twinkling, were somber as he explained the presence of the Dementors. A hush fell over the hall as the students absorbed this unsettling news. The mood lightened somewhat as Dumbledore introduced the new professors. Please welcome Professor Remus Lupin, who will be taking over Defense Against the Dark Arts, he announced, gesturing to a shabby-looking man who gave a small wave. And our very own Rubeus Hagrid, who will be teaching care of magical creatures. The hall erupted in applause, particularly enthusiastic for Hagrid, who was blushing furiously beneath his wild beard. As the feast concluded, Harry and Reggie made their way to Ravenclaw Tower, while Roger and the other prefects guided the first years. The next day marked the beginning of their grueling all-year schedule. In every class, professors emphasized the importance of the upcoming exams, piling on homework and stressing the need for diligent study. Your owls will determine the course of your future careers, Professor McGonagall said sternly in Transfiguration. I expect each of you to put in the necessary effort to achieve the best results possible. Similar speeches were echoed in charms, potions, and every other subject. By the end of the first week, the fifth years were drowning in assignments and required reading. Despite the increased workload, Harry's apprenticeship with Professor Flitwick remained a priority. Their sessions, held after regular classes, were a welcome respite from the workload of the all-year assignments. However, not all of Harry's classes were as enjoyable. While Remus Lupin's Defense Against the Dark Arts lessons were informative and well-taught, Harry found himself increasingly irritated by the professor's attempts to connect with him outside of class. After one particularly trying lesson, where Lupin had once again tried to engage Harry in personal conversation, Harry finally snapped. With all due respect, Professor, Harry said coolly, I'm not interested in building a relationship with you. It's a bit late for that and not necessary, don't you think? Lupin's face fell. Harry, I want you to know I had no part in your parents' and Dumbledore's decision to send you to the Dursleys. I would never have agreed to that. Harry's eyes flashed. Perhaps not, Professor. But you didn't do anything to stop it either, did you? Sirius fought tooth and nail for me. Where were you? Lupin flinched as if struck. I didn't want to cause trouble. I thought Dumbledore must have had good reasons. And that's the problem, isn't it? Harry retorted, his voice cold. You didn't want to offend anyone. You went along with it, never questioning, never fighting for what was right. Sirius risked everything for me. You risked nothing. The silence that followed was deafening. I'm sorry, Harry, Lupin whispered. I should have done more. Harry nodded. Yes, you should have. But what's done is done, Professor. Why do you think I will forgive you for your actions when I have not done so for my birth parents until now? Give up, Professor. Make the best of what you have. Be a good godfather for Charles and don't bother to come into my life. I don't need you. Without waiting for a response, Harry turned and left the classroom, leaving a dejected Lupin behind. After that confrontation, Lupin kept his distance, much like Lily Potter had done for years. He watched Harry from afar but never approached him again. Harry found this arrangement much more tolerable, allowing him to focus on his studies and other priorities without the distraction of unwanted emotional entanglements. As the weeks passed, Harry immersed himself in his coursework, apprenticeship, and personal magical studies. His mornings were still dedicated to his night training exercises, each session bringing him incrementally closer to becoming a great knight. The threat of the escaped Death Eaters hung over the school like a dark cloud, exacerbated by the constant presence of the Dementors. Many students struggled with nightmares and a pervasive sense of gloom. The once lively grounds of Hogwarts grew eerily quiet in the afternoons. Students, wary of encountering Dementors and seeking refuge from their chilling influence, retreated to the relative safety of the castle after classes. Despite the heightened security measures, there were no signs of the fugitives. Harry kept the Marauders map open at all times, having modified it to alert him if certain names appeared within the castle grounds. His primary goal was to deal with the Lestranges, particularly Bellatrix, before they could cause any harm. Pettigrew, while still a threat, was deemed a lower priority. Harry reasoned that the rat animagus's cowardice and ability to transform made him more likely to flee than fight, and nearly impossible to catch without specialized means. Only Sirius, with his heightened senses, stood a real chance of apprehending the traitor. As Harry navigated through his challenging fifth year, balancing his increased workload, he remained acutely aware of the limited time he had before Voldemort's inevitable return. Harry was determined not to waste a single moment. Chapter 193, Talons of Justice, Paws of Deceit. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves as Harry made his way across the Hogwarts grounds, his mind preoccupied with his latest charms project. His contemplation was abruptly interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps behind him. Harry! Harry, wait up! Neville Longbottom called out, slightly out of breath as he caught up. To Harry's surprise, Charles was with him, looking equally flustered. Harry turned, raising an eyebrow at their appearance. "What's wrong, Neville?" "Charles?" he asked, curiosity piqued by their urgent manner. Neville, panting slightly, gestured to Charles. "It's about Buckbeak, the hippogriff. There was an incident in our Care of Magical Creatures class. Charles needs your help, but well..." Charles, looking uncomfortable and clearly struggling to find the right words, picked up where Neville left off. "I know we're not close, Harry, but I didn't know who else to turn to. I heard you have connections in the Ministry. Can you please help me save Buckbeak?" The events went like this. As Charles recounted the tale, Harry listened intently, his mind already drawing parallels to the events he remembered from the books. Apparently, just as in the canon timeline, Draco had insulted the hippogriff, resulting in an attack and Draco getting scratched. This should have happened a few weeks back as per Harry's recollection. He surmised that perhaps Charles and the Potters had already tried and failed to save Buckbeak, forcing Charles to swallow his pride and come to him for help. "Malfoy's father is threatening to have Buckbeak executed," Charles finished, his face pale with worry. Harry hesitated, looking between Neville's hopeful face and Charles's anxious one. He had no personal attachment to Buckbeak, having never interacted with the hippogriff. However, memories of how Buckbeak had helped the canon Harry and Sirius flooded his mind. The loyal creature had been a crucial ally in times of need, and Harry couldn't help but feel a sense of obligation to help. After a moment of consideration, Harry nodded, his mind already formulating a plan. "All right, I'll see what I can do. No promises, but I'll try to help." The relief on both Neville's and Charles's faces was palpable. "Thank you, Harry," Charles said sincerely. "I really appreciate this." "We both do," Neville added, a grateful smile spreading across his face. That evening, back in the quiet of the Ravenclaw common room, Harry penned a carefully worded letter to Amelia Bones. He explained the situation in detail, being sure to emphasize the injustice of the threatened execution for the endangered magical creature and the potential precedent it could set. Harry knew that appealing to Amelia's strong sense of justice was his best bet. Amelia's reply came swiftly, carried by a sleek ministry owl. Her response was reassuring. She promised to use her influence to ensure a fair and thorough investigation. This was quintessential Amelia, always adhering to her unwavering sense of justice, just as he had hoped. True to her word, within days, Ministry officials arrived at Hogwarts to conduct a thorough inquiry into the incident. The investigation was swift and impartial. Witnesses were interviewed, including students from various houses who had been present during the class. Hagrid's teaching methods were scrutinized, and his lesson plans were examined with meticulous care. Even Buckbeak himself was subjected to a thorough examination by magical creature experts, who tested his temperament and responsiveness to commands. A week later, the verdict was announced. Buckbeak was declared a safe and well-trained hippogriff, posing no undue threat when handled properly. It was Malfoy's own fault for not listening to the professor and acting rashly. However, the investigation had unforeseen consequences. While Buckbeak was saved, concerns were raised about the appropriateness of introducing such advanced creatures to third-year students. Despite protests from students who had grown fond of him, Hagrid was removed from his position as Care of Magical Creatures professor. The news hit the gentle half-giant hard. Harry sought him out later that day, finding Hagrid in his hut, surrounded by his beloved magical creatures. "I'm sorry, Hagrid," Harry said, genuine regret in his voice. "I couldn't help you keep your job." Hagrid wiped his eyes with his massive handkerchief. "It's not your fault, Harry. Ya did what ya could. At least Beaky's safe, thanks to you." However, all was not lost. In a surprising turn of events, Hagrid was given a chance to challenge the ruling. If he could prove that he could teach a proper class in a safe manner, adhering to ministry-approved curriculum standards, he could be reinstated. The news seemed to reignite a spark in Hagrid's eyes, and Harry noticed Hermione Granger already pulling out parchment and quills, ready to help Hagrid prepare for this challenge. During this incident, Harry also confirmed something he had been curious about. Contrary to the events of the books and as Harry had thought, Hermione did not have a time-turner. She had only 3 electives, not nearly as many as in the canon timeline, and thus did not need to use a time-turner to attend all her classes. Harry sighed with relief. If Dumbledore or McGonagall had really given her a time-turner, he would have seriously worried about their sanity. The idea of entrusting a device that could meddle with time to a 13-year-old was very dangerous. That night, as Harry was about to turn in for bed, he felt a sudden vibration from the Marauder's map tucked inside his robes. Frowning, he quickly unfolded it, his eyes widening as he saw one of the names he'd been searching for all year, Peter Pettigrew. Without hesitation, Harry grabbed his wand and invisibility cloak, slipping out of the Ravenclaw dormitory with practiced stealth. He raced through the castle, following Pettigrew's movements on the map. The dot labeled Peter Pettigrew was near the Gryffindor Tower, moving erratically. As he reached the corridor near Gryffindor Tower, Harry slowed down, his eyes darting between the map and his surroundings. Just as Harry stepped onto the floor, the name vanished from the map. "Hominum Revelio," Harry whispered, waving his wand. Nothing happened. Frowning, he tried a series of other detection spells, each more complex than the last. Still, there was no trace of Pettigrew. It seemed the rat had managed to slip away. Sighing in frustration, Harry turned to leave, unaware that his every move was being observed by a pair of beady eyes. Hidden in a small hole in the wall near one of the corridor lamps, a rat watched intently as Harry departed. What Harry didn't realize was that the Marauder's map, for all its brilliance, had its limitations. It didn't show the names of individuals hidden within the walls or pipes of the castle. Moreover, with the help of the Lestranges, Pettigrew had acquired enchanted items that hid him from detection spells. As Harry's footsteps faded away, the rat's whiskers twitched nervously. Peter Pettigrew, in his animagus form, had just witnessed something that both terrified and intrigued him. He had seen Harry looking at the map and, having used the same map with his friends many times, he instantly recognized it. With this new bit of information, the rat scurried into the pipes, his tiny heart racing. He needed to get out of the castle and relay this crucial information to his partners. Their plan for Hogwarts was not going to be as simple as they had hoped. Chapter 194, The Fugitives' Dilemma. In a hidden cave on the outskirts of Hogsmeade, 4 figures huddled around a flickering fire. The dancing flames cast eerie shadows on the rough stone walls, creating an atmosphere of tension and foreboding. If Harry had seen the place, he would have found it familiar, as this was the very cave Sirius had used to hide when he stayed at Hogsmeade in another timeline. The escaped Azkaban prisoners, Bellatrix, Rodolphus and Robustan Lestrange, looked up as Peter Pettigrew scurried in, transforming from his rat form with a soft pop. They were in much better condition now, having made a pit stop at Lestrange Manor and changed into new, more presentable robes. However, the haunting effects of their long imprisonment in Azkaban were still evident in their gaunt faces and the hollow look in their eyes. "Well?" Bellatrix demanded, her wild eyes glinting with a manic energy that seemed to crackle in the air around her. "What news from the castle, Wormtail?" Pettigrew's face was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he spoke. Sweat beaded on his forehead, a testament to the fear that gripped him. We may need to reconsider our plan to attack Potter and Longbottom at Hogwarts. It's not going to be as easy as we thought. Before he could continue, Bellatrix leapt to her feet, wand in hand. Her sudden movement sent sparks flying from the tip of her wand, illuminating her crazed expression. Reconsider? Reconsider? We don't have time for caution. I want to finish the Dark Lord's mission now. Rodolphus grabbed her arm, forcing her to lower her wand. His touch seemed to calm her slightly, though the wild light in her eyes remained. Bella, calm yourself. Let's hear what the rat has to say. Pettigrew swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. It's Harry Potter, the Elder Potter. He's using the Marauder's map. The Lestranges exchanged confused glances, but Pettigrew pressed on, his words tumbling out in a rush. It's a magical map we created back in school. It shows everyone's location in Hogwarts. He nearly caught me with it tonight. And why didn't he? Robestan asked, frowning. His voice was calmer than his brother's or Bellatrix's, but no less intense. I was in the walls, Pettigrew explained, wringing his hands. The map doesn't show those. But if I'd been in the open, he'd have found me for sure. Also, the locket you gave me hid me from the boy's detection spells. Bellatrix's eyes narrowed dangerously. So what? We get rid of the boy first, get the map, and then we can easily use it to get our hands on the younger Potter and Longbottom. Pettigrew hesitated, visibly wilting under Bellatrix's fierce gaze. There's more. I've heard rumors in Hogwarts, apparently, he's the under-17 dueling champion. He is also an apprentice of Professor Flitwick, the dueling master. I don't have the confidence to take him on. As he finished, Bellatrix's face contorted with a mixture of rage and excitement. So what if he can duel? He's just a kid. We're the Dark Lord's most faithful. We'll storm the castle, take what we need, and kill anyone who stands in our way. Robestan shook his head, exchanging a worried glance with his brother. Bella, think. Our wands are temporary and unreliable. We cannot use our full strength with these. If we rush in and this Harry Potter or the professors interfere, then we'll kill them too. Bellatrix shrieked, her eyes bulging. Her voice echoed off the cave walls, making them all wince. We'll kill them all. For the Dark Lord. Rodolphus stood, placing himself between Bellatrix and the cave entrance. No, Bella. We can't risk it. Not yet. Bellatrix turned on him, her wand raised. The air crackled with tension as magic sparked at the tip of her wand. You dare stand in the way of our Lord's mission? You coward! It's not cowardice, it's strategy, Robestan interjected calmly, though his hand moved subtly towards his own wand. If we fail, we're no use to the Dark Lord. We need to be smart about this. For a moment, it seemed Bellatrix might curse them all. The cave fell silent, save for the crackling of the fire and Bellatrix's heavy breathing. But slowly, the wild light in her eyes dimmed slightly. She lowered her wand, though her body still trembled with barely contained energy. Fine, she spat, her voice dripping with venom. What do you propose? Rodolphus turned to Pettigrew, who flinched under his gaze. You'll go back. Watch Harry Potter. Learn his routines and his weaknesses. But be careful, if he has the map, one wrong move and you're caught. Pettigrew nodded, looking terrified at the prospect. His eyes darted towards the cave entrance as if contemplating fleeing then and there. We'll wait, Robestan added, his voice steady and calculated. Gather more information. When the time is right, we'll strike. Fast and hard, before Potter or anyone else can interfere. Bellatrix snarled, pacing the small cave like a caged animal. Her movements were jerky and unpredictable, a physical manifestation of her unstable mental state. The Dark Lord won't be pleased with this delay. The Dark Lord will be less pleased if we fail, Rodolphus countered firmly, standing his ground despite Bellatrix's intimidating presence. As they began to refine their plans, the tension in the cave was palpable. Bellatrix's barely contained madness, the brothers' cautious plotting, and Pettigrew's obvious fear created a volatile mix that threatened to explode at any moment. Meanwhile, back in his dormitory at Hogwarts, Harry was blissfully unaware of the plans being made against him. He had no idea that the fugitives knew about him and were plotting to deal with him. Even if he had known, it's unlikely his actions would have changed. In fact, he would have welcomed their attack with open arms, seeing it as an opportunity to lure them out of hiding and into his trap. Harry's more immediate concern was how Pettigrew had vanished from the Marauders map. There was no way he could have missed him, which meant the map wasn't as foolproof as he had believed. This realization unsettled him, forcing him to acknowledge that he couldn't put his complete trust in the magical parchment. He would have to be even more cautious, even within the supposedly safe walls of Hogwarts, to avoid being caught off guard. With no new names appearing on the map, Harry gave it one last glance before deactivating it and preparing for bed. He knew Pettigrew would return, and next time, he was determined to be quicker. The next few days passed without incident. There were no Pettigrew sightings, and Harry found himself at a loss for how to proceed. The idea of waiting for the fugitives to act and hoping to reach them in time when they were exposed wasn't ideal, but it seemed to be his only option at the moment. The presence of Dementors patrolling the castle grounds further restricted his movements. He couldn't freely search for the fugitives in his spare time because of them. While he was capable of fighting them off, doing so would cause a commotion that would undoubtedly alert the fugitives and cause them to flee. Despite the looming threat, Hogwarts was far from quiet during this time. The Quidditch season had begun, driving out some of the gloomy atmosphere that had settled over the castle. Harry observed that the Dementors seemed agitated by the sudden surge of positive emotions emanating from the excited students. Although Harry himself wasn't particularly interested in this year's Quidditch season, he couldn't help but notice the fervor with which the teams were preparing. The Gryffindor team, in particular, was pushing themselves to the limit. This was their captain Oliver Wood's last season, and he was determined to secure the Quidditch Cup before graduating. However, they faced stiff competition. All the house teams were exceptionally strong this year, with Marcus Flint, the Slytherin captain, also in his final year and equally desperate for a victorious send-off. As the drama of the Quidditch season unfolded, the presence of the Dementors began to fade into the background of most students' minds. Days flew by in a flurry of classes, homework, and Quidditch practice, and before anyone realized it, Halloween had arrived. Harry felt a sense of foreboding as the holiday approached. He knew something was going to happen on Halloween. Sirius attacks the fat lady's portrait in the books to get to Pettigrew. But in this altered world, where the target of the fugitives was likely Charles, rather than the rat Animagus, Harry couldn't be sure what to expect. As the Halloween feast approached, Harry found himself on high alert. Harry was determined to be ready for whatever was going to happen. Chapter 195, Halloween Havoc Part 1. The Great Hall was alive with the festive spirit of Halloween. Enchanted pumpkins floated above the tables, their carved faces grinning and grimacing at the students below. The ceiling, bewitched to reflect the night sky, showed a full moon peeking through wispy clouds. The air was filled with the delicious aroma of roasted meats, pumpkin pies, and various magical confections. Conspicuously absent was Harry Potter, who had chosen to dine in the kitchens as usual. Unlike the previous year, however, he had insisted his friends remain at the feast. "There's a high chance the Azkaban escapees might try something tonight," Harry had explained to a concerned Roger earlier that day. "I'd feel better knowing you're all safe in the Great Hall. But what about you?" Reggie had pressed, his brow furrowed with worry. "Shouldn't you stay with us for safety?" Harry had simply smiled with confidence in his eyes. "I can handle myself. Don't worry." Now, as the feast was in full swing in the Great Hall, Harry sat in the cozy warmth of the Hogwarts kitchens. Surrounded by eager house elves, he had a barely touched plate of food in front of him. His attention was focused on the Marauders map spread out before him, his eyes scanning every corridor and secret passage. "Master Harry is not eating," Pinky, a particularly attentive elf, said worriedly, his large eyes fixed on Harry's face. "Is the food not to Master Harry's liking?" Harry smiled reassuringly at the elf, tearing his gaze away from the map for a moment. "The food's great, Pinky. I'm just preoccupied." As the feast in the Great Hall began to wind down, Harry's vigilance was rewarded. A familiar name appeared on the map, Peter Pettigrew. The dot was moving swiftly through the dungeons, not far from the kitchens. The other three names were missing, but Harry knew they had no means of hiding from the map. The moment they entered the castle, he would be alerted. Harry leapt to his feet, startling the house elves. "Sorry, I've got to go," he said hurriedly, already moving towards the exit. "Thanks for the delicious food." He raced through the corridors, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallways. The portraits on the walls watched curiously as he passed, some calling out questions that went unanswered. As Harry neared the spot where he'd seen Pettigrew on the map, he slowed, wand at the ready. But the corridor was empty, just like the last time. Frowning, Harry checked the map again. Pettigrew's dot had vanished from the whole map as if the man had simply ceased to exist within Hogwarts. Determined not to let the rat escape this time, Harry began a thorough search of the area. His persistence paid off when he discovered a small hole in the wall, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. "So that's how you've been moving around," Harry muttered, his mind racing with the implications. He could see that the hole led to the pipes, the very pipes the basilisk had used the previous year to move around the castle. As Harry tried to move closer to the hole, to attempt to see if he could widen it and enter himself, a deafening explosion rocked the corridor. The force of the blast sent him stumbling backward, debris raining down around him. Harry's training kicked in instinctively. He dropped to the ground, casting a quick shield charm around himself. Chunks of stone and dust bounced off his magical barrier, creating a cacophony of noise that echoed through the now damaged corridor. As the dust settled, Harry could hear the sound of approaching footsteps. Multiple sets, running fast. The professors had arrived, likely alerted by the explosion. "Mr. Potter." Professor McGonagall's voice cut through the settling dust, her Scottish brogue more pronounced in her concern. "Are you all right? What happened here?" Harry picked himself up, dusting off his robes. He quickly assessed the situation, deciding how much to reveal. "I'm fine, Professor. As I was leaving the Hogwarts kitchen after my meal, I saw a rat running in the corridors. Thinking it might be Pettigrew, I followed it into this corridor. He must have set off the explosion to cover his escape. Or this might have been a trap designed for me. I'm not sure." Professor Flitwick, who had arrived with McGonagall, began examining the blast site. His small form moved nimbly over the debris as he cast various detection spells. "Curious," he muttered, his brow furrowed in concentration. "This doesn't seem like a typical explosive spell. It was surely a trap for you. Looks like Pettigrew underestimated you. Good that you used my training well and are unharmed." Lupin, who had joined them, moved to the place Harry had indicated Peter's escape route. He started investigating, his wand moving in intricate patterns as he cast detection spells. His face was grim. As the other professors joined in the investigation, Harry was dismissed. He walked away, his mind whirling with thoughts and theories. The explosion seemed pointless, a waste of effort that achieved nothing except to alert the castle to Pettigrew's presence. On his way back, he pondered the purpose of the explosion. It seemed so ineffective, until a sudden vibration from the map in his pocket jolted Harry from his thoughts. He pulled it out, his heart sinking as he saw new names appear: Bellatrix, Rodolphus, and Robustan Lestrange. They were heading towards the moving staircases. It didn't make sense at first why they were going there until Harry saw a group of people heading in that very direction: Charles, Neville, and a small group of their Gryffindor friends. The objective of the Lestranges became painfully clear. A diversion, Harry thought out loud, the pieces falling into place. Now the explosion in the dungeons made sense. With no professors near the group of Gryffindors or himself, he would have to deal with this on his own. There was no time to delay. He sprinted towards the Lestranges. As he ran, Harry couldn't help but accept that the Death Eaters were intelligent and very nothing like villains in stories. They had thought of traps and distractions to move the professors away from their target. It was a well-executed strategy, one that might have worked perfectly if not for Harry's vigilance and the Marauders map. Chapter 196, Halloween Havoc Part 2. Meanwhile, blissfully unaware of the danger approaching, the Gryffindor students were making their way back from the feast. Charles walked with Ron and Hermione, while Neville trailed slightly behind, listening to Seamus recount a particularly funny moment from the feast. "Did you see Nearly Headless Nick's reenactment of his botched beheading?" Seamus laughed, his Irish accent thick with mirth. "Brilliant stuff, that." They stepped off their moving staircase onto their floor, but before they could move to the corridor, figures emerged from the shadows ahead. The laughter died in their throats as they realized who stood before them. Bellatrix Lestrange stood in the center, her wild hair framing a face twisted with malice. Flanking her were Rodolphus and Robustan, their wands already drawn and pointed at the group of students. "Well, well," Bellatrix cackled, her voice echoing in the suddenly silent corridor. "If it isn't the boy who lived, Little Longbottom, and some cute little Gryffindors. How convenient." The students froze, terror etched on their faces. Neville, in particular, paled at the sight of the woman who had tortured his parents into near insanity. Now, no need to look so frightened," Bellatrix cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We're just here to finish an unfinished job." Her eyes fixed on Charles and Neville, a predatory gleam in their depths. Charles, to his credit, stepped forward, placing himself between the Death Eaters and his friends. Following his lead, Neville stepped forward too, though his legs were visibly shaking. The others remained frozen in fear, their wands forgotten in their pockets. "I won't let you hurt anyone else, monster," Neville said, his voice trembling but determined. "Longbottom," repeated Bellatrix, and a truly evil smile lit her gaunt face. "Why, I have had the pleasure of meeting your parents, boy." Neville was visibly shaking now, a mix of anger and terror battling across his face. Bellatrix's aura of insanity was overwhelming, seeming to fill the corridor with a palpable sense of dread. Bellatrix raised her wand, aiming at Neville. "I don't have much time, but who says you can't have some fun on the job? I'll let you experience what your parents felt that night." Crucio! The curse flew towards Neville, who stood frozen in terror. But before it could connect, a massive slab of concrete materialized in its path, absorbing the spell and crumbling to dust. Harry Potter stood before the students, his wand raised and a look of grim determination on his face. He had not arrived at the nick of time, as stories often portray. He had been there for a minute or two, using the time to cast protective wards and traps in the area to ensure that the missing Pettigrew could not meddle in his fight with the Lestranges. Now, although Harry had not completed his preparations, seeing Neville in danger, he had jumped in to save him. "That's the end of the road for you, Lestranges," Harry said, his voice cold and confident. "It's back to Azkaban for you." Bellatrix's eyes widened in surprise before narrowing dangerously. "The elder brother is here to save the day. It looks like the rat failed in one of his objectives. No worries, I can finish his job too." Harry's lip curled in a smirk. "If you were Voldemort, I might be worried. But just you three with second-hand wands? It's better if you surrender. It can help avoid the embarrassment of getting your butts kicked by a 16-year-old boy." "You dare speak his name," whispered Bellatrix, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and rage. It seemed she had not heard Harry's mocking words, fixated instead on his casual use of Voldemort's name. "Yeah," said Harry, maintaining his confident demeanor. "Yeah, I've got no problem with saying Vol." "Shut your mouth!" Bellatrix shrieked, her face contorted with fury. "You dare speak his name with your unworthy lips, you dare besmirch it with your half-blood's tongue, you dare!" The enraged Bellatrix cast the first spell, a jet of red light shooting from her wand. The two Lestrange brothers, equally furious, followed her lead, their own curses flying towards Harry. What followed was a duel unlike anything the Hogwarts students had ever witnessed. Spells flew thick and fast, the air crackling with magical energy. The corridor lit up with flashes of various colors as curses, hexes, and charms collided in midair. The Lestranges, true to their reputation, fought with a savage intensity. Their spells were designed to maim and kill, dark magic that left scorch marks on the walls and floor where they missed their target. But Harry was more than a match for them. His wand was a blur as he cast shield charms, conjured objects to absorb deadly curses, and returned fire with his own barrage of spells. He was constantly moving, placing himself between the Death Eaters and the students, ensuring no stray curse could reach the terrified onlookers. Despite facing 3 opponents, Harry held his ground. All the while, he hoped the professors would arrive soon. With these students around, he couldn't go all out and take out the 3 Death Eaters. He had to spend some of his strength to protect these bystanders from the unforgivables. Any mistake could lead to death. "Run!" Harry shouted over his shoulder, deflecting a killing curse with a conjured mirror. "Get to safety!" But the Gryffindors, true to their house's nature, didn't flee. Instead, they began to fight back, casting whatever spells they knew at the Death Eaters. "Stay back!" Harry shouted, frustration evident in his voice. "I don't need your help. Get to safety. That way I can go all out without worry." Their help was hurting him instead of helping. Now he had to be careful of any stray spells from these inexperienced students hitting him or inadvertently shielding the Death Eaters from his attacks. From the expression of anger on Harry's face, the Gryffindors finally got the message and stopped helping. They decided to run to safety, though Charles and Neville hesitated, clearly torn between fleeing and staying to help. Rodolphus, seeing the students attempting to escape, snarled, "That won't do." He was about to cast a large-scale spell to block the fleeing students, but Harry, anticipating this, quickly said, "You're too late. The professors are just a floor below. In a few moments, it's back to Azkaban for you three. Truth be told, Harry didn't know if the professors were nearby. It was a bluff, a desperate attempt to buy time and protect the escaping students. But the bluff worked. The Lestranges, aware that Harry had a special map that could see everyone's location in the castle, believed he was telling the truth. They exchanged quick glances, silently communicating their next move. Then, Robistan made a sharp gesture with his wand. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, an explosion rocked the corridor behind them, sending debris flying and filling the air with dust. Harry, having learned from the earlier explosion, didn't fall for this distraction. He trusted his wards and traps to slow down Pettigrew, who he suspected was behind him and had caused the explosion. The Lestranges had turned to run, but Harry wasn't about to let them escape so easily. He sent a barrage of bone breakers and blasting curses at their retreating forms. The Lestranges blocked some spells, but others found their mark. Despite the pain, the three didn't stop, disappearing around a corner in their desperate bid for freedom. Harry didn't follow. He could have pursued the Lestranges, but he was worried about the explosion and Pettigrew. If he left here, Pettigrew might go after the students. For their safety, Harry had to stay put. "Is everyone all right?" he asked, his eyes scanning the group for injuries. The Gryffindors looked shaken but unharmed, staring at Harry with a mixture of awe and gratitude. Before anyone could answer, the sound of running footsteps announced the arrival of the professors. Dumbledore was in the lead, his usually twinkling eyes now sharp with concern. They came from the Gryffindor Tower side and not from downstairs, which struck Harry as odd. From the other side, more professors arrived at the same time. It looked like Harry's bluff had been true after all. Had the Lestranges waited a minute longer, they could not have escaped. Harry quickly removed the traps he had set earlier. "Mr. Potter," the headmaster said, taking in the scene of destruction. "What happened here?" As Harry explained the situation, he learned why help had been so long in coming. Not only had there been the explosion in the dungeons, but the portrait of the fat lady had also been attacked. "It seems Pettigrew attempted to enter Gryffindor Tower," Lupin explained, his lips pressed into a thin line. When the fat lady refused him entry, he slashed her portrait in a rage. The realization dawned on Harry. The attack had been carefully planned, with multiple distractions to keep the professors occupied while the Lestranges went after their real targets. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled as he regarded Harry. "Good job protecting these students, Mr. Potter. It looks like your study under Filius is going well. You will be a force to be reckoned with in the wizarding world." Harry replied modestly, "I'm not there yet, Professor. My aim is to be strong enough to be in control of my destiny. There's still a long way to reach that goal." That was a veiled message for Dumbledore, but Harry didn't see any reaction to indicate whether the headmaster had understood the subtext. After a visit to the hospital wing to check for injuries, the students were escorted back to their dormitories, including Harry. The corridors were eerily quiet, the usual Halloween cheer replaced by a tense silence as the reality of what had transpired began to sink in. With a heavy sigh, Harry entered the Ravenclaw Tower. He assumed there wouldn't be another direct confrontation with the Death Eaters in the near future because he had hurt them quite badly. They would need a healer to take care of their injuries, which would likely force them into hiding for some time. As the common room came into view, Harry saw it was full of students, all eyes turning to him as he entered. He knew the night for him was not over yet. With another sigh, he stepped towards them, bracing himself for another round of interrogations. It was moments like these that made him miss the days when he acted in secret. He wouldn't have had to deal with things like this in the aftermath. Chapter 197, Aftermath and Quidditch Storm. The morning after the Halloween attack, Harry woke feeling refreshed, the adrenaline of the previous night's events having worn off. As he made his way to the Great Hall for breakfast, he couldn't help but notice the odd looks and hushed whispers that followed him. The attention was even more intense than after his under-17 Dueling Championship victory or his apprenticeship announcement. Students from all houses craned their necks to catch a glimpse of him, and conversations hushed as he passed by. Harry understood the reason behind the increased interest. Standing one's ground against three of Voldemort's most feared Death Eaters was no small feat. Still, he found the extra attention uncomfortable. It could potentially interfere with his future covert activities, as people would be more likely to notice and remember his movements. As Harry tried to eat his breakfast amidst the stares, he couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversations around him. "Did you hear? He fought off all three Lestranges single-handedly. I heard he used wandless magic to protect the other students. Do you think he'll teach us some of those spells? Harry sighed inwardly, knowing that the rumors would only grow more exaggerated with time. He was considering leaving early when Professor McGonagall approached him. "Mr. Potter," she said, her voice low to avoid drawing more attention, "the Aurors are here. They'd like to speak with you about last night's incident." Harry nodded and followed her out of the Great Hall. As they walked through the corridors, McGonagall informed him of the new security measures. "The Ministry has added extra protection to Hogwarts," she explained, her Scottish brogue more pronounced in her evident displeasure. "Aurors will now be patrolling the corridors at night, in addition to the Dementors guarding the perimeter." Harry could sense McGonagall's displeasure at this intrusion into Hogwarts affairs. For his part, Harry was indifferent to the change. It wouldn't affect his plans. More interestingly, the fact that Aurors were now permitted inside Hogwarts suggested that Dumbledore's influence was waning. Harry couldn't help but feel satisfied at this development. Upon entering the headmaster's office, Harry was greeted by a contingent of Aurors. While Sirius was absent, Amelia Bones herself had come to lead the investigation. James Potter, Mad-Eye Moody, and several other Aurors Harry recognized from their visits to Bones Manor were also present. Dumbledore sat behind his desk, his usual twinkling eyes serious as he observed the proceedings. Amelia immediately embraced Harry, her usual professional demeanor momentarily set aside as she checked him for injuries. "I'm so relieved you're safe, Harry," she said, her voice filled with pride. "What you did last night was incredibly brave." Harry downplayed his actions, conscious of the watching Aurors and Dumbledore. The Death Eaters were using unfamiliar wands, which slowed their casting. It made it easier to handle them, even outnumbered. Mad-Eye grunted from the side, his magical eye swiveling to focus on Harry. "Even so, holding off 3 Death Eaters while protecting other students is no small feat for someone your age. You've got good instincts, Potter." After Harry modestly accepted the praise, the Aurors asked him to recount the events of the previous night. He provided a detailed account, carefully omitting any mention of the Marauders' map or his prior knowledge of the attack. He ended with a suggestion: "I managed to hit them with some nasty curses. They might need healing. That could be a lead to follow." Amelia nodded, making a note on a piece of parchment. "We'll look into that, thank you. Your insight could be valuable in tracking them down." Mad-Eye then asked if Harry had any ideas for patrolling Hogwarts, mentioning that Sirius had praised Harry's strategic thinking. Harry thought for a moment before responding. "You could station people at the secret entrances to Hogwarts." He turned to James, who had been standing quietly throughout the interview. "Mr. Potter should know the passages Pettigrew might use to enter the castle. Guarding those might at least keep out the Lestranges, even if the rat is harder to stop." James looked surprised at being addressed directly, but nodded in agreement. "That's actually a good idea. I'll work with the team to identify and secure those passages." After some further discussion, Harry was excused. As he was leaving, James stopped him, his hand hovering uncertainly as if he wanted to place it on Harry's shoulder but thought better of it. "Harry," he said, his voice filled with genuine gratitude, "thank you for saving Charles's life." Harry brushed off the thanks, maintaining his emotional distance. "I was just protecting students from Death Eaters. I would have confronted them regardless of who their target was." Without waiting for a response, Harry left, feeling the familiar urge to distance himself from the elder Potters. In the days that followed, the castle gradually returned to normal. The presence of patrolling Aurors seemed to be effective, as Harry saw no sign of Death Eaters on the Marauders' map except, of course, for Snape. As the fear of intruders began to fade, excitement for the upcoming Quidditch match between Hufflepuff and Gryffindor took center stage. Harry was grateful for the shift in attention away from him and towards the sport, though he still caught people watching him in the corridors and common room. The morning of the match arrived, bringing with it a palpable excitement that seemed to push aside the gloom of the recent attack. Harry made his way to the Quidditch pitch with his friends, noting the unusually large crowd. He was not here for the match but for the trouble that was due to follow during it. He had his wand at the ready and his mind focused, prepared for the Dementors he knew would make an appearance. It was supposed to be Gryffindor vs Slytherin as usual, but the weather today was bad with heavy rains and wind. Marcus Flint had played his tricks and changed the match to Gryffindor and Hufflepuff. The Slytherins clearly didn't want to play in this weather. "Everyone's eager to see Charles Potter's new firebolt in action," Roger explained as they found seats in the stands, huddling under umbrellas to shield themselves from the rain. "We want to know how he flies with it to prepare strategies against it." Harry nodded, his eyes scanning the sky. It looked like the Potters were really spoiling Charles. Maybe the broom was to ensure Charles finally showed his potential on the field and that the Gryffindor house would forgive him for his actions in the previous years. Well, it was working well for now since Charles and the Firebolt were getting the loudest cheers from the Gryffindor stands. As the teams took to the air, Harry's eyes were drawn to his brother. The weather was bad and the visibility low, but Harry with his heightened sight and senses was able to follow everything that was happening. Charles, playing chaser, moved with a grace and speed that was truly impressive. The Firebolt responded to his slightest touch, allowing him to weave through the Hufflepuff defense with ease. The match was not great. With the winds and low visibility, the players were having difficulty keeping on their brooms, much less scoring goals. But the teams were adapting slowly as the game went on. Charles, with his superior broom, was handling the weather better. He scored goal after goal, putting his team firmly in the lead. The red and gold section of the stands was in a constant state of celebration, their cheers barely audible over the howling wind. Harry turned his attention to Susan, who was among the Hufflepuff chasers. She was playing really well, but since she was on a Nimbus and not a Firebolt, she was no match for Charles. Harry remembered that Sirius and Amelia thought she was too young to handle a Firebolt. Even though Susan had played with Harry's Firebolt during the summer, they hadn't gotten her one of her own. As the game went on and the weather worsened, the crowd was slowly losing sight of the players high in the dark clouds. Suddenly, there was an unnatural chill in the air, the telltale signs of Dementors approaching. Harry reached for his wand, scanning the sky intently. The weather made it difficult to spot the Dementors, but Harry was able to see the players on their brooms. He could see Charles faltering, signs that he was affected by the Dementors, although Harry couldn't see one near Charles. Harry searched for the Dementors, not wanting to interfere in the game without the situation becoming too dangerous. No one had seen the Dementors yet, Harry just knew from the signs. Before Harry could spot the Dementors, however, he saw Cedric zooming up and catching the golden snitch. The match had ended. Hufflepuff wins. Came the announcement. The Hufflepuff stands erupted in cheers, their joy piercing through the gloomy weather. But the celebration was short-lived. Suddenly, a wave of black-cloaked figures swept onto the pitch. Dementors! Someone screamed, and panic exploded through the stands. The creatures descended in a terrifying swarm, their rattling breaths audible even over the howling wind. The temperature plummeted and all around students were crying out in fear, some collapsing as the Dementors' influence overwhelmed them. The intensity of the Dementor invasion was higher than what Harry remembered from the books. In the books, only the canon Harry was severely affected by the Dementors. Here, the impact seemed more widespread and devastating. On the pitch, chaos reigned. Players struggled to control their brooms in the sudden, bone-chilling cold. Harry's eyes darted to Charles, who was visibly faltering, his movements becoming erratic. A Dementor glided towards him, skeletal hands outstretched. Without hesitation, Harry leapt to his feet, wand raised. Expecto Patronum! He roared. The silver Thunderbird erupted from his wand, its wingspan massive and radiant even in the gloom. It soared towards Charles, interposing itself between him and the Dementor. But the danger was far from over. More Dementors were flooding the pitch, circling players and diving into the stands. Harry saw Cedric, still clutching the snitch, nearly unseated as a Dementor swooped past him. Harry's Patronus wheeled in the air, diving and striking at the Dementors. Other silvery shapes joined it, a cat from McGonagall, a phoenix from Dumbledore, as the professors fought back. But the Dementors kept coming, drawn by the fear and excitement of the crowd. Through the chaos, Harry saw Charles lose his grip on his broom. As if in slow motion, he saw his brother fall. A scream of Charles cut through the din, Lily Potter, her wand out, slowing her son's descent. The firebolt hovered in its place, the advanced broom not going out of control and zooming into the whomping willow like the broom in the books Harry remembered. Dumbledore's voice boomed across the stadium, magnified and terrible in its fury. The intensity of his Patronus increased, and Harry too put more power into his Patronus. Gradually, the combined efforts of Harry, Dumbledore, and the other professors drove the Dementors back. As the last of the dark creatures fled, an eerie silence fell over the stadium, broken only by the sound of rain and the occasional sob from the stands. Dumbledore was visibly furious with what had happened. The crowd could feel his anger from far away, his magical aura palpable even through the rain and wind. As the stadium cleared and the teams were escorted back to the castle, Harry had no idea what would happen next. The Dementor invasion had been too fierce. Many were affected by their presence and would need time to recover from this experience. Harry hoped that the parents could convince the minister to remove the Dementors from Hogwarts. This incident had proven just how dangerous their presence truly was. As Harry made his way back to the castle, his mind raced with the implications of what had just occurred. The timeline was shifting dramatically, with familiar events becoming more intense and dangerous than he remembered. This deviation served as a stark reminder that his knowledge of the future was becoming less reliable. Harry realized he needed to be more vigilant than ever, preparing for the unexpected and adapting his strategies on the fly. Chapter 198, Professor Potter. The day after the Quidditch match, the incident was quickly exposed to the outside world by a Daily Prophet front-page article. It created an uproar in the wizarding world, especially among the parents of Hogwarts students. They were horrified upon hearing what their children had to go through. The public outcry was unanimous, everyone wanted the Dementors out of Hogwarts. However, Minister Fudge was not budging on his decision. Even if he knew he might have been wrong in placing the Dementors at Hogwarts, he did not want to withdraw them because doing so would mean accepting he had made a mistake in the first place. It would mean he had made a wrong decision that put children in danger, and this would essentially wipe out his chances of re-election and end his political career. This, Harry mused, was the reason most politicians never accept their mistakes and apologize. With the minister refusing to withdraw the Dementors entirely, Dumbledore, the DMLE, and other ministry officials finally got a concession from him to keep the Dementors out of Hogwarts boundaries. The Dementors could still patrol outside Hogwarts wards, but under no circumstances could they come inside. Although this was not enough for the parents and others, they had to be satisfied with this compromise for now. At Hogwarts, everyone was still digesting the events of the Quidditch match. Chocolates became a lifesaver, and students could be seen munching on them as they made their way around classes to alleviate the lingering effects of the Dementors' presence. One night, as Harry sat around with his friends in an empty classroom, Cedric said, "I can't stand those Dementors anymore. Even if they are far away, I still feel the effects. It's like they're sucking all the joy out of everything." Roger nodded in agreement, his usual cheerful demeanor subdued. "I feel like I can't even remember what being happy feels like." Reggie, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since the incident, looked up from his textbook. "Harry, how difficult is it to learn the Patronus charm? I don't want to be as defenseless as I was that night against those creatures." Everyone turned towards Harry, their eyes filled with a mixture of hope and curiosity, really wanting to know his answer. Harry considered the question carefully before responding. "It is advanced magic, but I can teach you how to cast a Patronus in a couple of months. However, learning the complex Patronus charm is the easy part. Casting one successfully when the Dementors are in front of you and all your bad memories are amplified increases the difficulty of the spell many times. All I can do is teach you the charm, the rest is up to you. You will have to overcome that fear on your own." Arabella, her voice uncharacteristically soft, pleaded, "Something is better than nothing. Please teach us the spell, Harry." Angelina chimed in, her Gryffindor determination shining through. "Yes, Harry, please teach us. Even if we never successfully use it to defend against the Dementors, it's still a cool spell. Also, I hear you can send long-distance messages with it." Harry nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Okay then. I'll prepare a lesson plan. You'll have to help me find an empty classroom where I can teach everyone." Cedric's face lit up. "Thanks, Harry. Is it okay if we invite other interested students?" Harry considered this for a moment. "It's okay if anyone wants to come. But please warn them beforehand that I can't teach everyone hand in hand. I can only dedicate an hour each night for this. They might have to practice on their own after getting the basics right with me." Cedric nodded understanding. "That's fine. Everyone knows about your busy schedule, and with your reputation, no one will want to pester or anger you." The idea spread quickly through the Hogwarts grapevine, and soon Harry found himself with a sizable group of students eager to learn. The classroom Harry's friends had found was not big enough to house everyone, so they were split into groups, with each group coming on different days. Harry's friends and close ones like Susan and Neville, along with their close friends, had special privileges and could attend every day. Harry noted that Charles and his two friends did not attend. He later learned they had special classes with Lupin for the same spell, which didn't surprise him given Lupin's expertise with the charm. With everything ready, the classes began. On the first night, Harry stood before the assembled group, a mix of excitement and nervousness palpable in the air. All right, everyone, Harry began, his voice clear and confident. You are here to learn the Patronus charm, so without any chit-chat, let's get to it. Anyone want to talk about the theory part since I'm lazy enough to do so? A sixth-year Ravenclaw raised her hand, and after Harry gave her permission, she spoke, her voice slightly trembling with nervousness. The Patronus charm is an extremely difficult spell that channels the caster's positive emotions into a powerful protection. When cast properly, it evokes a partially tangible positive energy force known as a Patronus. It is the primary protection against Dementors and Lethofolds, against which there are no other defenses. The incantation is Expecto Patronum. Harry nodded approvingly. Correct. To add to that, there are two types of Patronuses, the incorporeal variant, which takes the form of a shapeless wave of mist. Harry demonstrated, a silver mist flowing from his wand, before continuing, and the corporeal variant, which has a definite shape, taking on the form of the animal that the caster has the greatest affinity for. With another flick of his wand, Harry's Thunderbird Patronus burst forth, its silvery wings spread wide as it soared around the room. The spectacle increased the excitement of the audience and their interest in the spell, with gasps and murmurs of awe filling the classroom. The incorporeal Patronus is weaker than its corporeal counterpart, but the corporeal Patronus is more advanced and difficult, Harry explained as his Patronus faded away. To defend against one or two Dementors, the incorporeal one is enough, and that will be the aim of this class. I want everyone to learn to cast at least the incorporeal Patronus in 3 months. Maybe some of you can cast the corporeal Patronus in the same time. After that, I'll be busy with owl preparations and won't have time. Harry then proceeded to demonstrate the wand movement, guiding the students through the motion slowly and carefully. Let's start with the wand movement. It's a counterclockwise spiral, like this. And so, Harry became Professor Potter for 1 hour every night, teaching everyone the Patronus charm. He moved among them, offering encouragement and advice, reminding them of the importance of emotional focus. Remember, he said to a frustrated Roger, who was struggling to produce even a wisp of silver, it's not just about the memory itself, but the feeling it evokes. Let that happiness fill you up. Slowly but surely, progress was being made. The 6th and 7th years were the first to show a silver mist after a few days of coaching, their greater magical reserves and experience giving them an edge. Harry's friends followed closely behind, their determination and extra practice time paying off. The younger ones were having a tougher time due to having less magical power, but they were not giving up. Harry knew that the spell was not as easy as the books made it out to be in the DA classes. It was truly a complicated and advanced spell, requiring time, patience, and emotional strength, otherwise many more wizards in the world would know how to cast one and spell would not have the reputation of it has. As the days flew by, Harry found himself growing into his role as a teacher. He felt genuine joy in seeing others succeed in their attempts. One evening, as Harry was guiding a group of students through the wand movement, he noticed Professor Flitwick slip quietly into the back of the classroom. The diminutive charms professor observed the lesson with keen interest, his eyes twinkling as he watched Harry patiently explain the intricacies of the spell. After the session, Flitwick approached Harry, beaming with pride. Excellent work, Harry. Your teaching methods are most impressive. I dare say you have a natural talent for teaching. Harry felt a warmth of satisfaction at his mentor's praise. Thank you, Professor. Word of Harry's successful Patronus classes spread beyond the student body. A few days later, Harry was surprised to find a group of Aurors, who had been assigned to patrol Hogwarts at night, waiting for him after one of his sessions. Mr. Potter, one of them, a tall witch with short grey hair, addressed him. We've heard about your classes and your ability to cast a corporeal Patronus effortlessly. Some of us, well, we were wondering if you might have some tips for improving our own Patronuses. Harry was taken aback a little. Of course, he replied, realizing the importance of having as many capable casters as possible. I'd be happy to help. He knew that these Aurors would be crucial in defending against the Dementors, especially when they eventually joined Voldemort after his resurrection, as Harry knew they would. Every person who could cast a Patronus was another line of defense against the darkness. Over the next few days, Harry found himself not only teaching students but also offering advice to trained Aurors. He worked with them on focusing on their happy memories and refining their casting technique. The Aurors, despite their initial hesitation at being taught by a student, soon came to respect Harry's expertise. They made progress quickly and were quickly becoming proficient in casting a corporeal Patronus. As Harry watched his students, both young and old, practice their Patronuses, he felt a sense of purpose and satisfaction. The sight of silvery wisps gradually taking form filled him with pride. Yet, even as he savored this moment, Harry knew that despite his enjoyment of teaching, it wasn't his ultimate path. With so much to learn and achieve in this world, dedicating himself to teaching full-time would consume too much of his valuable time and energy. While he could envision perhaps taking on apprentices in the future, the role of a professor at Hogwarts or elsewhere wasn't part of his grand plan. His destiny, he knew, lay elsewhere, in the intricate dance of magic and power. Chapter 199, Wings of Thunder. As the Christmas holidays approached, Hogwarts life continued its usual rhythm. The second Quidditch match of the season, Hufflepuff vs Ravenclaw, became the focus of excitement, momentarily pushing aside thoughts of Dementors and escaped Death Eaters. A week before the match, Susan approached Harry, her eyes gleaming with determination. "Harry," she began, her voice a mix of excitement and nervousness, "could I borrow your firebolt for the upcoming match?" Harry hesitated, weighing the implications. "I don't know, Susan. It's against Ravenclaw, after all." While Harry didn't have unwavering loyalty to Ravenclaw, he knew his decision could affect the match's outcome. Susan pressed on, her voice taking on a pleading tone. "Please, Harry. Auntie and Padfoot are coming to watch, and I really want to show them what I can do. I want to make them proud." Harry felt his resolve weakening. He knew he probably shouldn't give his broom to an opponent, but Susan's earnest request was hard to refuse. With a sigh, he nodded. "All right, but just this once." As the match began, the Ravenclaw team got a jolt as Susan, astride Harry's firebolt, snatched the quaffle and scored the first goal before anyone could react. From that moment on, the game belonged to Hufflepuff. Susan seemed to be outperforming herself, playing the best she had ever played. Her teammates, buoyed by her performance, rose to the occasion as well. Harry watched from the stands, a mix of pride for Susan and sympathy for his house team warring within him. The game was thrilling, with goals traded back and forth, but the outcome was decided when Cedric caught the snitch, securing Hufflepuff's victory. With victories in both their games, Hufflepuff had emerged as the favourites to win the cup. After the team celebration, Harry joined Sirius and Amelia to congratulate Susan. "Well done, Susan!" Sirius exclaimed, pulling her into a bear hug. "You were amazing out there." Amelia nodded in agreement, her usually stern face softened with pride. "Absolutely fantastic flying. You've clearly been practicing hard." Susan, seizing the moment, asked hopefully, "Does that mean I can get a firebolt of my own?" Amelia's response was swift and firm. "No." Sirius, ever the softy, whispered something to Amelia. After a moment's consideration, Amelia relented slightly. "Well, you can use Sirius's firebolt for practice and games from now on. But only for these. If I hear you've used the broom for anything other than Quidditch, you'll be grounded from ever flying on a broom again. Are we clear, young lady?" Susan's face lit up with excitement as she nodded vigorously, barely containing her joy. In the aftermath of the match, Roger was understandably miffed at Harry for lending Susan his broom. To make amends, Harry found himself promising to play for the team next year when Roger was almost certain to be named Quidditch captain. Harry made this promise knowing full well that it was unlikely to be fulfilled, given the Triwizard tournament scheduled for the following year. However, the promise was enough to console Roger, who quickly returned to his usual cheery self, already planning and imagining how he would form and manage the Quidditch team to win the cup for Ravenclaw. As the last few days of term passed in a flurry of excitement and anticipation, the Christmas holidays finally arrived. Harry found himself eagerly anticipating his return to Black Castle. He had recently reached the stage where he could transform into his Thunderbird animagus form but had refrained from doing so at Hogwarts. Unsure of the spectacle his transformation might create or how he might behave in his new form, Harry had wisely decided to wait until he was away from the watchful eyes of Dumbledore and the other professors. Back at Black Castle, Harry wasted no time. He made his way to the edge of the island, ready for his first true transformation. The weather seemed to sense the momentous occasion, with dark clouds gathering overhead, as if nature itself was anticipating the emergence of the Thunderbird. Harry closed his eyes, feeling the pent-up energy of his animagus form straining for release. It had taken supreme effort to restrain himself these past few days, the Thunderbird within him yearning to break free and soar. As he finally relinquished control, Harry's senses sharpened dramatically. With a scream that shook the very ground, he vanished into the clouds in a blinding bolt of lightning, followed immediately by a deafening thunderclap. The Thunderbird was free at last. The next several hours would be forever etched in Harry's memory. At first, the Thunderbird instincts dominated, with Harry's human consciousness along for the ride. Gradually, however, the two aspects of his being wizard and animagus began to merge, until Harry truly became the Thunderbird. The experience of flying as a Thunderbird was beyond anything Harry had ever imagined. When the air currents weren't to his liking, he simply willed them to change. If he desired to climb higher, he would dissolve into lightning and thunder, reappearing at a greater altitude. Harry rocketed across the Atlantic skies at the head of a vast thunderstorm, his triumphant cries echoing through the heavens, daring anyone to challenge his dominion over the sky. Every moment was pure, unadulterated freedom and power, and Harry reveled in it. As dawn approached, Harry found himself still aloft, having flown through the entire night without tiring. The first rays of sunlight pierced the clouds, illuminating the sea below. For the first time, Harry caught sight of his reflection in the water's surface. He saw a massive bird, reminiscent of an eagle but far more majestic, with a wingspan easily exceeding a dozen feet. His feathers were the deepest, most intense blue, seeming to absorb the very light around them. His eyes glowed with the color of lightning, fierce and penetrating. Long, razor-sharp talons and a cruelly hooked beak completed the image of a formidable predator. After indulging in a few more exhilarating maneuvers, Harry decided it was time to return to Black Castle. The flight back was swift, covering in seconds what would have taken minutes even on his firebolt. As he approached the island, Harry felt a mixture of elation at his successful transformation and a tinge of regret at having to return to his human form. Landing gracefully on the same spot from which he had taken off, Harry focused on reversing the transformation. In a flash of lightning and a rumble of thunder, he stood once more in his human form, his hair windswept and his eyes still crackling with residual energy. As he stood on the edge of the island, Harry's mind raced with possibilities. He was eager to experiment with the abilities and traits he might have gained from the animagus transformation. Could he control lightning and weather in his human form? He willed himself to test it, but found his body unresponsive to his commands. The school, the journey home, and the night of magical flight had depleted his energy and magical reserves, with the flying taking the greatest toll. Harry realized that further experimentation would have to wait. A good rest and a hearty meal were needed before he could properly test the extent of his new abilities. The thought of sharing his transformation with Arcturus and Sirius brought a smile to his face. Sirius, in particular, was completely unaware of Harry's magical animagus form. Harry couldn't wait to see his godfather's reaction to the revelation. However, all that would have to come later. For now, fatigue overwhelmed him. Harry made his way back to the castle and upon reaching his room, he barely managed to change out of his clothes before collapsing onto his bed. Within moments, he was fast asleep, his dreams filled with soaring through storm clouds and the exhilarating freedom of flight. Chapter 200, Stormwing. The afternoon sun was high in the sky when Harry finally stirred from his slumber. He blinked groggily, memories of his night as a Thunderbird flooding back, each vivid detail etched into his mind with startling clarity. Stretching, Harry made his way to the window, gazing out over the sprawling grounds of Black Castle. The world looked different somehow, sharper and more vibrant. He realized with a start that he could make out individual leaves on trees far in the distance, a testament to his enhanced eyesight, an unexpected but welcome side effect of his transformation. Eager to test the full extent of his new abilities, Harry quickly dressed and made his way outside. The crisp winter air nipped at his skin as he stood on the castle grounds. Closing his eyes, he focused on the memory of his Thunderbird form, feeling the magic surge through him. The transformation was smoother this time, his body remembering the change. In a flash of brilliant blue light, Harry found himself once again in the form of a majestic Thunderbird. He spread his wings, marveling at their impressive span, before launching himself into the air with a powerful thrust. The sensation of flight was even more exhilarating in the light of day. Harry soared high above the castle, reveling in the freedom and power coursing through him. He experimented with his newfound abilities, willing the clouds to darken and gather around him. With barely a thought, he could summon lightning, directing it with pinpoint accuracy at targets he conjured far below. Perhaps most impressive was his ability to travel through thunderclouds. With a mere thought, Harry could dissolve into lightning and reappear elsewhere, covering vast distances in the blink of an eye. It was a form of magical transportation unlike anything he had ever experienced. Quick but with the limitation that he could use it only inside special clouds. After hours of exhilarating flight, Harry reluctantly returned to the ground. As he shifted back to his human form, he felt a residual energy crackling beneath his skin. Curious, he extended his hand, willing a small bolt of lightning to appear. To his amazement, a spark danced across his fingertips, completely wandless. Over the next few hours, Harry meticulously tested the changes in his magic due to this transformation. He discovered that weather-related magic came to him as naturally as breathing now. Lightning spells, in particular, were effortless, requiring minimal concentration and no wand. When he did use his wand, his personal wand with the Thunderbird core, the results were nothing short of spectacular. A simple lightning bolt spell became a devastating arc of energy that could reduce a conjured target to ashes in seconds. Harry couldn't help but grin at the implications this newfound power could have in future duels. The next day, Harry invited Sirius to the Black Castle. He had been anticipating this moment, eager to share his transformation with his godfather. Sirius had long been trying to persuade Harry to learn the animagus transformation, but Harry had declined, not wanting an ordinary animal form. Now that he had achieved a magical animagus form, Harry could barely contain his excitement to reveal it to Sirius. From his window, Harry could see the two men standing in the grounds, Sirius looking around curiously while Arcturus maintained his usual stoic demeanor. He had asked them to wait for him there for a surprise. Taking a deep breath to calm his nerves, Harry transformed and took flight, circling high above the castle before diving towards the unsuspecting pair. The rush of wind against his feathers was exhilarating, and he let out a piercing cry of joy. As he approached, Harry could see Sirius's eyes widen in alarm. His godfather reached for his wand, but Arcturus placed a restraining hand on his arm, a knowing smile playing on his lips. Moments before impact, Harry transformed back, landing gracefully before them with a wide grin. Surprise, Padfoot! Sirius stood slack-jawed, his wand hanging limply at his side. Harry? What? How? You're an animagus? Harry nodded, unable to contain his excitement. Not just any animagus. I'm a magical animagus, a Thunderbird. Over the next hour, Harry explained everything in detail, the ancient animagus ritual he'd discovered, how he'd used parts from the slain basilisk to increase his chances of a magical form, and the incredible abilities he'd gained as a result. Sirius listened in awe, relief washing over him as he learned the basilisk was truly gone. His expression cycled through amazement, pride, and a hint of concern. Why didn't you tell me about this? Sirius asked, a hint of hurt in his voice. Arcturus stepped in, his tone measured and calm. We decided it was best to keep it from you, Sirius. We didn't want to put you in a position where you'd have to lie about this in front of Dumbledore. Sirius nodded, understanding but still a bit miffed. I forgive you this time, he said, his voice firm, but never again. No more keeping secrets from me. I'm not the same Sirius anymore. Harry readily promised. Now there was no need to keep secrets. He was that confident in his abilities. Then Sirius's excitement returned to full force. Well, we have an important thing to decide next. You need a marauder-worthy nickname now that you've become an animagus. Any preferences? Harry shook his head. No, I'll leave it to you, Padfoot. You're the expert in this. Sirius grinned, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Well, in the last few minutes, I've already thought of a perfect one. How about Stormwing? Harry considered it for a moment, then nodded approvingly. Stormwing it is. As they made their way back to the castle, Sirius's expression grew serious. There's something you should know, Harry, he said, his tone grave. The Lestranges, they've got their wands back. Harry's eyes narrowed, his mind immediately shifting to strategic mode. How is that possible? They found a wand maker. Sirius shook his head. No, they got their original wands back. Seeing the look of confusion in Harry's eyes, Sirius explained how the purebloods' wands hadn't been destroyed after their arrest, merely locked away. With the majority of Aurors focused on guarding Hogwarts and keeping a lookout at the wand makers, security at the storage facility had been lax. Pettigrew, in his rat form, had managed to sneak in and steal not only the Lestranges' wands but several others as well. They're more dangerous than ever now, Sirius warned, his voice laced with concern. You need to be extra careful. Harry nodded, his mind already strategizing. I will be ready for them, he assured his godfather. And if worst comes to worst. He held up his hand, a purple spark forming in his palm. With a quick gesture, Harry directed the energy at the ground a few meters away. There was a small explosion, leaving the earth scorched and smoking. Sirius's eyes widened at the display. Is this the ability you gained after your transformation? Wandless thunder magic? This is not fair. All I got was a heightened sense of smell. Harry grinned, a hint of playful arrogance in his voice. Magic loves me and always keeps giving me these exciting gifts. Don't be jealous, Padfoot. Sirius chuckled, shaking his head. Well, I've long given up comparing myself to you. Now that you have this new magic in your arsenal, I'm no longer worried. The Lestranges will regret becoming your enemies, and maybe Voldemort too in the future. I hope so too, Harry replied, his tone becoming more serious as he thought about the future. After Sirius left, Harry divided his time between studying and exploring his Thunderbird form. He spent hours soaring over the Atlantic, reveling in his newfound freedom and power. He practiced his new abilities, pushing their limits and discovering new applications for his weather magic. All too soon, the holidays came to an end. Time passes quickly when you are having fun and are busy. Between flying and his other studies, Harry had no idea how the days had flown by. After a fun-filled train ride, and catching up with friends, it was back to Hogwarts for his second term of the 5th year. Owls were going to be the focus this term, a fact that had all his friends stressed over. The Lestranges and Wormtail were also on the back of Harry's mind. Although he was not worried about their danger to him personally, he was concerned that they might harm the students in the school. He would still have to monitor them and take them out before they became a threat. Additionally, he needed Bellatrix to get to the Horcrux in the Gringotts vault, a fact that added another layer of complexity to his plans. As Harry settled back into his dormitory, unpacking his trunk and greeting his housemates, a sense of anticipation filled him. Despite the looming dangers, he found himself eagerly looking forward to the potential adventures that lay ahead in this term. Chapter 201, The Calm Before the Storm. As the second term of the school year began, Hogwarts quickly settled into its familiar rhythm. For the 5th and 7th year students, however, this rhythm was more intense than ever. The looming specter of owls and newts cast a long shadow over their days, filling every spare moment with studying and revision. Harry found himself caught in this whirlwind of academic preparation. Between classes, assignments, and his extracurricular activities, free time as usual became a rare luxury. The common rooms and library were constantly bustling with stressed students, their noses buried in textbooks and parchments covered in hurriedly scribbled notes. Despite the mounting pressure, Harry was determined to maintain his apprenticeship with Professor Flitwick. When the diminutive charms master suggested Harry take a break to focus on his owls, Harry was quick to reassure him. I appreciate your concern, Professor, Harry said during one of their sessions, his wand still raised from their latest duel, but I assure you, I'm well prepared for the owls. This apprenticeship is too valuable to put on hold. What Harry didn't mention was his burning desire to hone his newly gained lightning affinity. He badly wanted to learn and control new lightning spells, and Professor Flitwick was the best person for this. The thrill of dueling with purple lightning was addictive. Flitwick regarded him with a mix of pride and concern, his eyes twinkling behind his spectacles. Very well, Harry. But promise me you'll speak up if it becomes too much. Harry nodded, grateful for his mentor's understanding. As they squared off for another duel, Harry felt the familiar excitement course through him. He was eager to incorporate his new lightning spells into his dueling repertoire, to see how they would fare against Flitwick's vast experience and skill. Meanwhile, the school was abuzz with the news of Hagrid's reinstatement as the Care of Magical Creatures professor. After his suspension at the beginning of the term, Hagrid had worked tirelessly with Hermione to develop a comprehensive and safe curriculum. His demonstration to the ministry officials had been a resounding success, earning him back his teaching position. Harry couldn't help but smile as he watched Hagrid lead his first class since returning. The half-giant's enthusiasm was infectious, and even the most nervous students found themselves drawn in by his passion for magical creatures. Hagrid's booming voice carried across the grounds as he introduced a new, ministry-approved creature, his eyes shining with unbridled joy at the opportunity to teach. Hagrid thanked Hermione profusely for her help, and for a few days, Hermione had a proud look on her face, basking in the success of her mission. She received praises from many Gryffindor students, though some were still sad about seeing the substitute professor who had taken over from Hagrid leave. In the midst of all this, Harry continued his Patronus classes. The progress of his students filled him with a sense of pride and accomplishment. Everyone could now produce a non-corporeal Patronus, and the more talented students were on the brink of achieving a full corporeal form. The room would often fill with silvery mist as students practiced, their faces scrunched in concentration. "Remember," Harry instructed during one session, his voice carrying over the muttered incantations, "the key is to focus on your happiest memory. Let it fill you up, let it drive away all doubt and fear." As he watched several silvery mists coalesce into more defined shapes, Harry felt a surge of hope. By the time he ended these classes in a few weeks, he was confident that several students would be able to produce a full Patronus. Although some of the less brave ones might never succeed in using it against a real Dementor, it was good to have this spell in their repertoire. Maybe when in danger, their hidden bravery would come out and succeed in fending off a Dementor. Despite the busy schedule and positive developments of the term, a sense of unease lingered over the castle. The Dementors still patrolled outside the Hogwarts grounds, a constant reminder of the danger that lurked beyond. Their presence could be felt even from within the castle walls, a subtle chill that never quite went away. Aurors continued their vigilant patrols inside the castle, their presence both reassuring and unsettling. The sight of their crimson robes in the corridors was a constant reminder of the threat that hung over them all. What puzzled Harry most was the continued absence of any attack from the Azkaban escapees. After regaining their wands, Harry had expected an immediate assault, particularly from the notoriously unstable Bellatrix Lestrange. The lack of action was entirely out of character for them, and it set Harry's nerves on edge. He found himself constantly checking the Marauders' map, half expecting to see those dreaded names appear at any moment. However, they soon peeked out as if to show they were still around Hogwarts and it was not safe yet. They were not spotted in the castle though, but in the Hogsmeade village near Hogwarts. A group of students during a Hogsmeade weekend in the third week of January saw a beggar-like man transforming into a rat and running away. Everyone, knowing this was Pettigrew, ran towards the castle in fear, their weekend plans forgotten in the rush of panic. The news spread quickly through the school, whispered in corridors and common rooms. Within days, Dumbledore announced the cancellation of all future Hogsmeade visits until the threat was neutralized. While many students grumbled about the loss of their weekend freedom, the grim reality of the situation kept most complaints to a minimum. As weeks turned into months, the term progressed rapidly. The OWL exams loomed ever closer, casting a pall of stress over the fifth-year students. Harry found himself spending more and more time in the library, helping his friends and those who struggled with certain subjects. It was a kind of revision for Harry too. Even though he was confident in practicals and had skills already above the Newt level, his theory required some revision. In the midst of all this academic fervor, Quidditch matches proceeded as usual, providing a welcome distraction from the stress of exams and the threat of Death Eaters. The Hufflepuff team, riding high on their early successes, seemed all but assured of winning the cup. Even Gryffindor's improved performance in later matches, bolstered by Ginny Weasley's impressive skills as their new Seeker, wasn't enough to overcome Hufflepuff's lead. The excitement in the Hufflepuff common room was palpable. The Hufflepuff students had a smile on their faces every day despite the dangers around, and talks of celebration plans were already underway. It would be their first cup win in many years, a fact that filled the often overlooked house with immense pride. Harry could hear their excited chatter in the corridors, see their yellow and black scarves worn with newfound confidence. As Harry watched the jubilant Hufflepuffs, Cedric and Susan among them, he was also happy. This term had been great till now, and Harry hoped it continued to be so. Even though Harry knew danger was only around the corner and the Death Eaters wouldn't give up on attacking Charles, he believed the other students should enjoy their school days. No fear of attacks should stop children from enjoying the happy days of school life that people don't get back. As Harry absorbed these happy sights, what he did not know was that the 4 fugitive Death Eaters were planning something in the background. They had learned to be smart, and since their last attack had failed, they were planning on completing their objective in a completely different way and with a good plan. Danger was going to strike, and this peaceful period was merely the calm before the storm. Chapter 202, Into the Shadows. As May arrived, bringing with it the promise of warmer days and the looming spectre of owls, Harry found himself in Professor McGonagall's Transfiguration class. The usually composed professor was noticeably hurried, rushing to complete the fifth-year syllabus before diving into the OWL exam revisions. Harry's mind, however, was far from the intricacies of advanced transfiguration. The past months had been too quiet without any incidents, and it was giving him bad vibes. It was uncharacteristic for the mentally unbalanced Death Eaters to bide their time and do nothing for so long. He had a very bad feeling about all this. Now that he had very few prophetic advantages due to the changes he himself had caused in the timeline, he was always on edge to ensure nothing disastrous happened. Harry hadn't been idle these months, though. He had finished his Patronus classes, and many students had surprisingly learned the corporeal Patronuses. It was quite a sight to see many silvery animals and birds flying, hopping, and running around the empty classroom. Higher year students, his friends, and some talented juniors like Neville and Susan were the ones who successfully cast the corporeal Patronus charms. Harry was quite pleased with this result, feeling a sense of pride in his students' accomplishments. Another thing Harry had done was to ensure the incidents in the canon did not happen. An incident he remembered was Sirius Black, the fugitive in the canon, breaking into the Gryffindor dorms using the password gained from Neville's notes to attack Pettigrew. Harry ensured this didn't happen by giving Neville a badge that could be accessed only by him where he could write himself reminders and notes. The badge would never get lost and would always return to Neville's pocket. Neville had been very excited on receiving this gift. The new password keeper, some knight who had replaced the fat lady after the attack on Halloween, was an interesting fellow who kept changing the passwords. This made it difficult for Neville to remember the password. Harry's gift was a godsend. Nothing had happened at Hogwarts in this term. Maybe it was due to Harry's precautions and actions like these, but he did find these quiet days unnerving. As he was lost in these thoughts, absent-mindedly twirling his wand, he felt a sudden vibration from his pocket. With practiced stealth, Harry slipped the Marauder's map from his robes. Keeping it hidden beneath his desk, he muttered the activation phrase and scanned the parchment. His heart raced as he searched for the intruder, but to his confusion, he found no unfamiliar names. He was half expecting to see the Death Eaters on it on their way to attack Charles. But nothing. A chilling realization dawned on him: Pettigrew must have entered the castle and promptly hidden himself again. It had been months since the rat had dared to infiltrate Hogwarts, and Harry's instincts screamed that it was him and this wasn't a casual visit. For the remainder of the class, Harry's attention was split between McGonagall's lesson and surreptitious glances at the map. But Pettigrew's name never reappeared, and both Charles and Neville remained safely within the castle walls. Nothing seemed amiss, yet the sense of unease persisted. As soon as class ended, Harry bolted from his seat, earning a reproachful look from McGonagall. He spent the next hour combing the castle, questioning portraits and ghosts alike, but found no trace of anything unusual. Frustrated and increasingly anxious, Harry retreated to the room of requirement to clear his mind and practice some spells to calm his nerves. Destroying some dummies that the room produced always seemed to calm him down. The room transformed into a spacious training area, with various targets and obstacles for Harry to practice on. That evening, driven by a nagging suspicion, Harry once again consulted the map. At first, all seemed normal, until he spotted two names moving hurriedly across the Hogwarts grounds: Remus Lupin and Neville Longbottom. Frowning, Harry scanned the map for the familiar cluster of Charles, Ron, and Hermione, only to find them missing entirely. Harry's instincts screamed trouble. Without hesitation, Harry sprinted from the castle, his heart pounding as he raced to catch up with Lupin and Neville and learn what was happening. As he ran, his mind spun with possibilities, each more dire than the last. Dash! Meanwhile, at the edge of the Forbidden Forest, Neville struggled to keep pace with Professor Lupin's long strides. "Professor," he panted, "shouldn't we wait for backup? What if something's really wrong with Charles and the others?" Lupin's face was grim as he replied, "I've already informed Dumbledore. He's on his way back from the Ministry. For now, we need to confirm if this is a genuine emergency or a false alarm. The three of them are always up to something, and I don't want to disturb the professors and the patrolling Aurors without knowing if this was not one of the trio's secret adventures." Neville nodded, his round face edged with worry. He'd come to Lupin earlier, disturbed by Hermione's odd behavior this evening an hour or so ago. She had insisted that Charles, Ron, and Neville accompany her outside the castle to see something interesting. She said she had found a unicorn who had left her herd, and she had played with it in the forest. Now she wanted to show her friends her pet unicorn. While Charles and Ron had agreed readily, Neville had hesitated, unnerved by Hermione's uncharacteristic disregard for rules and safety. Also, he was not brave enough to go out at night into the Forbidden Forest. "It just wasn't like her, Professor," Neville said, his voice trembling slightly. "Hermione's always so careful, especially now with the Death Eaters about. And the way she kept pushing even after I said no. It scared me." Lupin's frown deepened as he listened. "You did the right thing coming to me, Neville. Let's just hope it is a false alarm. Hermione should not lead her friends into danger. Anyway, I have informed Professor Dumbledore, he would be here if anything goes wrong." As they pressed deeper into the forest, neither knew that an anxious Harry was running at his fastest speed to catch up to them from the castle. They had no idea they were walking into life-threatening danger. Dash! In a small clearing just beyond the Hogwarts wards, a scene of horror unfolded. Charles, Ron, and Hermione lay rigid on the forest floor, their eyes wide with terror as they stared up at their captors. Their bodies were shivering, signs that they had been under the Cruciatus curse a few minutes ago. The Lestranges and Peter Pettigrew stood over them, wands drawn and faces twisted with malicious glee. Bellatrix was in a rage, her wild hair seeming to crackle with the force of her anger. "You useless rat!" she shrieked at Pettigrew. "How could you fail to lure in the Longbottom brat as well? By now we could have finished our mission and started searching for our lord." Pettigrew cowered, his watery eyes darting nervously between Bellatrix and her victims. I tried my best," he stammered. "How was I to know the coward Longbottom would choose to stay behind?" Rodolphus Lestrange interjected, his voice cold with disdain. "We wasted weeks teaching you the Imperious Curse, all for this half-success. If you hadn't exposed our presence in Hogsmeade, we could have done the job ourselves and taken them both during a village visit." As the Death Eaters bickered, Charles locked eyes with Ron and Hermione. Hermione, after reaching the trap location, had been freed from the Imperious and now she was racked with guilt, thinking if she had been strong enough, she would not have fallen under control of the rat and lured her best friends into this trap. However, even if the trio knew they had no escape, their gazes conveyed a mix of fear and determination. Suddenly, Robistan held up a hand, silencing the group. "Someone's coming," he hissed, a predatory smile spreading across his face. The tension in the clearing ratcheted up several notches as the Death Eaters turned their attention to the approaching footsteps. The captive trio exchanged glances of mingled hope and fear, wondering who was about to stumble into this nightmarish scene. Chapter 203, The Battle in the Forest Part 1. The Forbidden Forest was eerily quiet as Remus Lupin and Neville Longbottom cautiously made their way through the dense undergrowth. Lupin's heightened werewolf senses were on high alert, his nostrils flaring as he tried to catch the scent of Charles, Ron, and Hermione. "Stay close, Neville," Lupin whispered, his wand at the ready. "And be prepared to run if I tell you to." Neville nodded nervously, his own wand trembling slightly in his grip. The darkness of the forest seemed to press in on them, making every shadow appear menacing. The boy's round face was pale in the dim light filtering through the canopy. "Professor," Neville whispered, his voice barely audible, "do you think they're okay?" Lupin paused, choosing his words carefully. "We have to believe they are, Neville. Charles, Ron, and Hermione are resourceful. But we need to find them quickly." They pressed on, the silence broken only by their muffled footsteps and the occasional hoot of an owl. After what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, Lupin suddenly froze. His keen ears had picked up the faint sound of voices. Signaling for Neville to stay quiet, he crept forward, following the sound. As they drew nearer, Lupin's blood ran cold. He recognized those voices, the cruel, mocking tones of the Lestranges and the wheedling voice of Peter Pettigrew. Fear gripped his heart as he realized Charles and the others had been captured by the Death Eaters. "It's them," he breathed, his face ashen. "The Death Eaters have Charles and the others." Neville's eyes widened in terror. "What do we do?" he whispered, his voice shaking. Lupin's mind raced. They had not stumbled upon an adventure gone wrong, as he had initially hoped. This was a carefully laid trap. Thinking about the unforgivables, Lupin understood that Hermione might have been under the Imperious Curse, used as bait to lure Charles out. His mind raced with the implications, guilt washing over him for not realizing the danger sooner. He wanted nothing more than to charge in and save Charles, but he couldn't risk Neville's life. Turning to the boy, he whispered urgently, "Neville, we need to go back. We have to get help." "But Professor," Neville protested, a flicker of Gryffindor courage shining through his fear, "we can't just leave them." Lupin placed a reassuring hand on Neville's shoulder. "I promise I'll come back for them, Neville. But right now, the best thing we can do is get reinforcements. We're outnumbered and outmatched." Reluctantly, Neville nodded. They began to retreat, moving as quietly as possible. But before they could get far, a shimmering in the air around them signaled the triggering of a ward. Lupin's heart sank as he realized they had been discovered. "Run, Neville!" he shouted, all pretense of stealth abandoned. But it was too late. Suddenly, spells erupted from the darkness. Lupin pushed Neville down, deflecting curses as best he could. The air filled with maniacal laughter as the Death Eaters emerged from the shadows, surrounding them. Bellatrix's wild eyes gleamed with triumph as she stepped into the clearing. "Look what we have here," she cackled. "The werewolf and the long-bottom brat. How kind of you to finish Wormtail's job for him." Pettigrew emerged from behind her, his watery eyes darting nervously between Lupin and Bellatrix. Lupin felt a surge of rage at the sight of his former friend. "This werewolf is really your friend, rat," Bellatrix continued, her voice dripping with mockery. "Now we have both boys. I will have fun with them before eventually sending them to their fate." Lupin's face contorted with fury. He placed himself protectively in front of Neville, his wand raised. "You won't touch my students," he snarled. "I'll die before I let you harm them." Bellatrix's eyes glittered with malice. "Oh, how noble," she mocked. "But don't worry, wolf. Death will come soon enough." Without warning, curses flew from the Death Eaters' wands. Lupin deflected and dodged as best he could, pushing Neville behind him. But he was outnumbered, and his reactions were slowed by his weakened state due to the proximity to the full moon. "Crucio!" Bellatrix shrieked, and this time, Lupin couldn't block in time. The curse hit him square in the chest, and he fell to the ground, his body racked with unimaginable pain. He could hear Neville's terrified cries, but he couldn't move, couldn't protect him. Unknown to the Death Eaters and the others as well, Harry Potter had arrived, hidden beneath his invisibility cloak. He watched in horror as Lupin writhed on the forest floor, Neville cowering behind him. Harry's mind raced, searching for a solution that wouldn't end in tragedy. He was confident in his ability to defeat the Death Eaters, but not when he had to protect the lives of others. He had been trained to fight while ensuring his own safety, not the safety of bystanders. The situation was far more complex than he had anticipated. For a brief, dark moment, Harry considered simply eliminating the threat permanently. This was the only way he could save everyone and end this trouble with complete confidence. With his precise cutting curses, he could end the battle in seconds. But he knew he couldn't. This wasn't wartime, and he had no legal right to take such drastic action. The consequences would be severe and inescapable. As he watched Lupin suffer under Bellatrix's curse, Harry made a decision. He would tackle the problem in stages. First, he needed to rescue Charles, Ron, and Hermione. Then he could deal with the Death Eaters. That would reduce the number of hostages and make the next fight easier. Also, he might be able to create traps in that location and attract the Death Eaters to take them out quickly without any casualties. This was the safest plan he could come up with on such short notice. He hoped Neville would not be hurt. Lupin could handle the pain, but Harry was worried about Neville. With that thought, Harry silently made his way to where Charles, Ron, and Hermione were being held. With quick counter spells, he began to free them from their bonds. "Harry!" Charles whispered, his eyes wide with a mixture of relief and fear. Harry pressed a finger to his lips, signaling for silence. But it was too late. Ron, overcome with relief, let out a strangled "Thanks, Harry," before Harry could stop him. The sound carried in the quiet forest, alerting the Death Eaters to another presence. Harry cursed inwardly as he heard Bellatrix's enraged shriek. "Someone else is here!" she yelled. "Find them!" Harry turned to the trio, his voice urgent. "Run! Get back to the castle and get help! Go!" There was no option of the trio staying with Harry and helping him in the fight. Harry's tone made it clear that they understood that. Also, the trio knew in their minds that they could offer no help in this scenario and the best they could do was to quickly get help. As Charles, Ron, and Hermione disappeared into the darkness, Harry steeled himself for the confrontation to come. The real battle was about to begin. Chapter 204, The Battle in the Forest Part 2. The Lestrange brothers had heard Ron's voice from their location. They demanded to know who else was there from Lupin. Lupin, still in agony, managed a defiant smile, hope rekindling in his eyes. Enraged, Robustan cast another Cruciatus at Lupin. "We should kill you now," he spat, "but that would be too merciful. We're not done with you yet." He and Rodolphus decided to investigate the disturbance, leaving Bellatrix and the rat to guard their captives in case someone else was there hiding to save these two. As the brothers reached the spot where the trio had been held, they found only empty air. Before they could react, 2 bolts of purple lightning streaked towards them. The spells were too quick for them to react and struck true. However, unfortunately for Harry, although the spells hit the target, the two brothers had dragon-hide armor which blocked the spell's power. Potter! Rodolphus snarled, recognizing his attacker. You'll pay for that, boy. Harry emerged from the shadows, his wand at the ready. I wouldn't count on that, he said coolly. The Lestranges attacked with fury. They wanted to kill Harry and erase the shame to their name after being defeated by Harry during the Halloween attack. Curses flew thick and fast, lighting up the dark forest with flashes of deadly magic. A fierce duel erupted, with Harry relying heavily on his newly mastered thunder spells. Despite being outnumbered, Harry's lightning-fast attacks kept the brothers on the defensive. Although they had dragon-hide armor, Harry could aim for places with no armor. Fulgur Ictus! Harry shouted, sending a bolt of lightning at Rabaston's exposed face. The Death Eater barely managed to duck in time, the spell singeing his hair. Rodolphus retaliated with a barrage of dark curses. Crucio! Conf Ringo! Avada Kedavra! Harry dodged and shielded, his movements fluid and precise. He could feel the raw power of his thunder magic coursing through him, amplifying his spells. After several intense minutes of back and forth, Harry saw an opening. With a complex series of wand movements, he conjured a storm of lightning bolts that rained down on the Lestrange brothers. Their dragon-hide armor protected them from the worst of it, but the sheer force of the attack knocked them off balance. Seizing the moment, Harry followed up with two perfectly aimed stunning spells. The red jets of light found their mark, and the Lestrange brothers crumpled to the ground, paralyzed. Panting slightly, Harry began securing the incapacitated brothers. But in his focus on the Lestrange brothers, Harry failed to notice Peter Pettigrew, who had transformed back into his human form behind him. Bellatrix had asked Wormtail to check the place when she heard a fight beginning between the intruder and the Lestrange brothers. Avada Kedavra! Pettigrew squeaked, his voice high with fear and desperation. Harry heard the incantation at the last second. Before he could consciously react, his arm moved of its own accord, his wand deflecting the green jet of light with an unknown spell. The killing curse ricocheted off into the trees, leaving a scorch mark where it hit. Harry stared at his wand in amazement, realizing this must be the protective ability of his Thunderbird core. But he never knew it was so powerful as to deflect a killing curse. Could his Thunderbird animagus form have boosted this ability? Recovering quickly, Harry sent a stunning spell at Pettigrew, who collapsed in a heap. For good measure, Harry approached the unconscious form. His fist clenched, knuckles white with barely contained rage. Without hesitation, he delivered a series of swift, powerful punches to Pettigrew's face. As he stepped back, Harry surveyed his handiwork. Pettigrew's face was already swelling, evidence of the beating that would leave him in pain for days to come. "That's a small payback for betraying my family, you rat," Harry muttered, his voice filled with satisfaction. With 3 opponents down, Harry raced back to where Neville and Lupin were being held, determined to end this once and for all. As he burst into the clearing, Bellatrix's eyes widened in recognition and fury. "You!" she shrieked. "Where are my useless husband and his brother?" "Taking a little nap," Harry replied, his wand trained on her. "You're next, Bellatrix." Bellatrix's face contorted with rage. She cast a killing curse at Lupin, but Harry conjured a stone block to intercept it. The block exploded, showering them with debris. "Ventus Maxima!" Harry shouted, sending a powerful gust of wind at Bellatrix. The spell caught her off guard, sending her flying away from her captives. With Bellatrix away from Neville and Lupin, Harry could fight with no worries. What followed was a duel of unparalleled ferocity. Bellatrix, despite her time in Azkaban, proved to be a formidable opponent. Dark curses flew from her wand in a constant stream, forcing Harry to push his skills to the limit. "Crucio!" Bellatrix screamed, her eyes wild with madness. Harry dodged, retaliating with a barrage of lightning spells. "Fulgur Katina!" A chain of lightning erupted from his wand, forcing Bellatrix on the defensive. As the battle raged on, Harry noticed Bellatrix beginning to tire, her endurance weakened by her long stay in Azkaban. He was gaining the upper hand, but he didn't want to end the duel too quickly. He needed Bellatrix to escape for his future plans. Harry wanted her to escape so that later he could catch her when no one was around and use her to get to the Horcrux in the Lestrange vault. So he was thinking of a believable way for her to escape from her precarious situation. Just as Harry was contemplating how to orchestrate Bellatrix's escape, fate intervened. A beam of moonlight broke through the canopy, falling directly on Lupin. Harry's eyes widened in horror as he realized what was about to happen. Before their eyes, Lupin began to transform. His body contorted, fur sprouting across his skin as he morphed into a werewolf. The transformation complete, the feral beast that was once Remus Lupin let out a bone-chilling howl. The werewolf, uncontrolled and savage, charged towards the dueling pair. Harry and Bellatrix were forced apart, dodging the beast's razor-sharp claws. Seizing her chance, Bellatrix cackled madly and fled into the forest. Until next time, Baby Potter. Her voice echoed back through the trees. Harry had no time to pursue her. The werewolf was bearing down on him, teeth bared and claws slashing. With no other choice, Harry met the beast head-on. Using his enhanced strength, Harry landed a powerful punch on the werewolf's snout. The force of the blow sent Lupin flying back, crashing into a nearby tree. Neville, who had been watching in terrified silence, let out a gasp of amazement. "Harry, how did you?" But Harry wasn't done. As the werewolf struggled to its feet, Harry pounced again. With a series of well-placed blows, he subdued the beast, each hit punctuated by a whimper from the wolf. Finally, the werewolf lay still, whimpering in submission. Harry quickly cast binding spells, securing Lupin. "Stay here with him, Neville," Harry instructed. "I need to go after Bellatrix." Without waiting for a response, Harry sprinted in the direction Bellatrix had fled. Once he was out of sight, he transformed into his Thunderbird form, taking to the skies to search for the escaped Death Eater. It didn't take long for Harry's keen Thunderbird eyes to spot Bellatrix. With a piercing screech, he dive-bombed her, knocking her unconscious with a single, powerful blow. Transforming back, Harry secured Bellatrix and called for Myra. "Take her to Arcturus," he instructed. "He'll know what to do." As Myra disappeared with Bellatrix, a chill ran down Harry's spine. He turned to see a horde of Dementors converging on the forest, drawn by the intense emotions of the night's events. Realizing the danger wasn't over, Harry raced back towards Neville and the incapacitated Lupin, ready to face whatever danger awaited him. Chapter 205, Dementors and Patronuses. The Forbidden Forest was eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves and the soft whimpers of a bound werewolf. Neville Longbottom stood alone in the darkness, his wand clutched tightly in his trembling hand. He kept casting nervous glances at the incapacitated werewolf form of Professor Lupin, remembering the ferocity with which the werewolf had attacked earlier. Even knowing it was his professor didn't quell the fear that sent shivers down his spine. Neville's eyes darted around the clearing, desperately hoping for Harry's return. The forest seemed to close in around him, every shadow potentially hiding another threat. He tried to steady his breathing, reminding himself that he was a Gryffindor, but the fear persisted. "Come on, Neville," he muttered to himself, "you can do this. You're not useless. You are brave. Harry will be back soon." Suddenly, a rustling from nearby bushes made Neville jump. His wand arm shot up, a spell on the tip of his tongue. "Neville? Is that you? Is it safe?" A familiar voice called out. Neville's heart raced. "Who's there?" he demanded, trying to keep his voice from shaking. "Show yourself slowly." Charles Potter emerged from the bushes, hands raised, followed closely by Ron and Hermione. "It's me, Charles," he said, relief evident in his voice. "So, Harry took care of the Death Eaters? He really is strong. Where is he?" Neville lowered his wand, relief washing over him at the sight of his friends. "Yes, Harry defeated Bellatrix, but something happened, and she escaped. Harry went after her." He frowned. "But why are you here? I thought you'd have run back to the castle for help." Charles looked sheepish. "Well, we got lost. Somehow, we ended up back here while wandering around." His eyes scanned the clearing. "Where's Professor Lupin?" Neville pointed to the bound figure on the ground. "There he is." Charles's eyes widened. "Moony. So that's how he looks. He never showed me his transformation before." Hermione's eyes lit up with understanding. "So I was right. Professor Lupin is a werewolf. All the clues pointed to it." She turned to Charles, a hint of accusation in her voice. "You knew? Why didn't you tell me?" Ron gasped. "Professor Lupin is a werewolf? I've been risking my life in all those Patronus and Dada classes." Charles shook his head. "Moony is harmless, Ron. Professor Dumbledore knows about his condition. He must have forgotten to take his wolfsbane potion today. He looked at the bound werewolf with a mixture of awe and concern. But Harry managed to subdue him? My brother is stronger than I thought. Hermione, ever the voice of reason, interjected, we shouldn't be standing around discussing this. We need to figure out how to get back to the castle safely. As the four discussed their next move, a sudden chill permeated the air. To their horror as they looked up, they saw hundreds of Dementors gliding towards them from all directions. Charles was the first to snap out of his fear-induced stupor. Quick, think of something happy! He shouted, raising his wand. Remember the Patronus lessons. The four students raised their wands, shouting Expecto Patronum. In unison. They hoped their training in the spell would help save their lives. Only wisps of silvery light emerged, but it was enough to keep the Dementors at bay momentarily. However, the dark creatures soon turned their attention to the unconscious werewolf. Charles watched in horror as they closed in on his godfather's prone form. Desperately, he tried to cast the Patronus again, determined to save Lupin. The werewolf awakened, whimpering in fear, but remained bound by Harry's spells. As a Dementor lowered its hood, preparing to administer the kiss, Charles turned to Hermione in desperation. Hermione, please, do something. Help my godfather. Hermione, moved by Charles's pleas, pointed her wand at the werewolf. Finite incantatum! She cried. The spell worked, undoing most of Harry's bindings. Fueled by fear and adrenaline, the werewolf broke free of the remaining restraints and bolted into the forest, away from the Dementors. Thanks, Hermione, Charles said, relief evident in his voice. No time for thanks, Hermione replied tersely. I don't need to remind you of our situation, do I? Try using the memory of the professor escaping to cast your Patronus, Charles. It might work. The Dementors, enraged by seeing their prey escape, had angrily moved in on the four. Charles nodded, closing his eyes and concentrating on the relief he felt seeing Lupin escape, imagining his father's joy at knowing Remus was safe. Expecto Patronum! He shouted. This time, a bright silver light erupted from his wand, coalescing into the form of a majestic stag. The Patronus galloped around the clearing, driving the Dementors back. Brilliant, Charles! Ron exclaimed, his face a mixture of awe and relief. Encouraged by Charles's success and the free space it gave to them, the others redoubled their efforts. After several attempts, Neville managed to produce a silvery badger that joined the stag in repelling the dark creatures. I did it! Neville cried, his face beaming with pride. I actually did it in front of Dementors. Unbeknownst to the four students, they were never in any real danger. As soon as the Dementors had closed in on them, they were being watched. Perched high in the trees, a Thunderbird observed the unfolding scene with keen interest and ready to act if the four were in any real danger. Its gaze alternated between the group of students and the spot where the Lestranges and Wormtail lay bound. The Thunderbird Harry in his animagus form had been monitoring the situation, curious to see how his brother and friends would handle the danger. He nodded in a show of approval seeing Charles successfully cast the Patronus and save Lupin. Charles was starting to show the traits of a real Potter. However, Harry's attention was soon drawn to the other side of the clearing. 3 Dementors were closing in on the bound Death Eaters. They, however, had no one to help them. The Lestrange brothers struggled futilely against their bonds as the creatures lowered their hoods. Although Harry could not kill the Death Eaters due to the wizarding laws, he was content to stand by and watch the Dementors do it for him. Harry watched dispassionately as the Dementors administered the kiss to the Lestrange brothers, their bodies going limp as their souls were sucked away. But as a Dementor approached Wormtail, something unexpected happened. In a moment of sheer terror, Wormtail managed to transform into his rat animagus form. This was not Harry's mistake. He had no means to stop Wormtail from transforming into his animagus. That needed special magic shackles which he did not have. What he did was to do his best to keep Wormtail from waking up and transforming. He did that, but the sudden change, coupled with the fear of imminent death, allowed him to wake up and slip free of his bindings. Before Harry could react, the rat had scurried into the underbrush and disappeared. Harry felt a twinge of frustration, but he wasn't entirely surprised. He recalled walking in on a prophecy from Trelawney about Wormtail returning to his master a few nights ago. It was similar to the canon, and Harry was not surprised on hearing Trelawney's second true prediction. He hoped to try to stop the prediction from coming true, but he failed. Turning his attention back to Charles and the others, Harry saw that they had successfully driven off most of the Dementors. Deciding it was time to intervene, he swooped down from his perch and transformed back into his human form. Even if Wormtail escaped, he was satisfied that the Lestranges were taken care of. They were the strongest of Voldemort's inner circle, and the Death Eaters would be much weaker in the future. With a powerful wave of his wand, Harry conjured his own Patronus, a massive, silver Thunderbird that lit up the entire clearing. The remaining Dementors fled before its radiance, disappearing into the night. The 4 students stared in awe at the magnificent Patronus before turning to see Harry emerge from the shadows. Relief and admiration were evident on their faces. "Harry!" Neville exclaimed. "Thank Merlin you are here. Where is?" Before anyone could speak further, however, the sound of multiple footsteps approached. Dumbledore led a group of professors and aurors into the clearing, their wands at the ready. As the adults took in the scene, Harry knew that the night's events were far from over. Explanations would be demanded, and he needed to think of believable explanations for things like the missing Bellatrix and the dead Death Eaters. But he was not worried. Chapter 206, Interrogations and Revelations. The clearing in the Forbidden Forest, once a scene of chaos and danger, now bustled with activity. Aurors and professors surrounded the group of students, their faces a mixture of concern and suspicion. Among them were Professors Dumbledore, Snape, McGonagall, and Lily Potter, while the Auror contingent included James Potter, John Dawlish, and a female Auror unfamiliar to Harry. Their confusion was palpable. Dumbledore had only told them that Charles and other children were in danger. Professor McGonagall addressed Harry, her voice firm but not unkind. "Mr. Potter, can you explain what happened here and where Professor Lupin is?" In his message, indicated he was pursuing Charles and his companions on some ill-advised forest adventure. Harry took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. "It's a complex situation, Professor. In short, Death Eaters captured this group, I intervened and managed to subdue 3 of them, but Bellatrix escaped due to an unexpected turn of events. I pursued her but failed to apprehend her. When Dementors arrived, these 4 fended them off until I returned and drove them away completely. As for how these 3 fell into the Death Eaters' trap, you'll need to ask them directly. I have no idea." Before the professors and aurors could press for more details, Dumbledore intervened. "Perhaps it would be wise to continue this discussion in the castle. This is not a suitable place for such conversations." Dawlish nodded reluctantly. "Very well, Dumbledore. But we need answers. The Minister will want to be updated as soon as possible, given the involvement of Death Eaters." As the group prepared to leave, Harry spoke up. "Before we go, we should collect the 3 Death Eaters I subdued. They're nearby." The aurors followed Harry to the location. After a couple of minutes of seemingly aimless wandering, Harry led them to the correct spot. The sight that greeted them was grim. The Lestrange brothers lay motionless, their eyes open and vacant. Harry, drawing on years of acting experience, feigned shock and horror. "Are they?" he asked, his voice trembling convincingly. One of the aurors confirmed grimly, "Looks like they've been kissed by Dementors." Harry's eyes widened in apparent surprise. "But where's Pettigrew? He was here too, I swear it." James's face hardened. "It seems Wormtail has managed to escape once again. This will complicate our report." Dumbledore, his voice heavy with disappointment, admonished, "Such talk is unbecoming, James. And Mr. Potter, leaving the Death Eaters bound and unattended was a grave error. Your actions have led to the extinction of an old lineage." Harry bristled at the accusation. "With all due respect, Headmaster, how was I to know the Dementors would breach the school grounds again after your explicit ban following the Quidditch incident? I did my best to capture the Death Eaters and leave them for the Aurors. Would you have preferred I let them go to escape and go after Charles and Neville again?" James and Lily sided with Harry, as did the students and the female Auror. Dumbledore's expression remained disappointed, but he said no more on the matter. As they prepared to return to the castle, Charles whispered urgently to James about Moony and his transformation. James's face paled slightly, and after a brief word with Lily, he set off alone into the forest. Dumbledore quickly took control of the situation. "We must return to the castle at once. This forest has many residents who do not take kindly to intruders, and we have overstayed our welcome." The journey back to Hogwarts was tense, with unasked questions hanging heavily in the air. Upon reaching the castle, they were ushered into Dumbledore's office, which felt oppressively crowded. Additional faces had joined them, Amelia Bones, Sirius Black, Minister Fudge, and other professors eager to learn what had transpired. The usually welcoming circular room now felt oppressive with the sheer number of occupants. Amelia Bones took charge while Fudge conferred with Dumbledore. I would like to know exactly what transpired tonight, from the beginning. Harry, ever strategic, suggested, if I may, Aunt Amelia, perhaps we should hear from Charles, Ron, and Hermione first, as they were the initial targets. Then Neville, who became involved later. I can fill in any remaining gaps. Amelia considered this approach, then nodded her approval. Very well, Harry. Mr. Charles Potter, please begin. Charles stepped forward, recounting how Hermione had suddenly insisted they go outside the castle, their ambush and capture by Death Eaters, and their rescue by Harry. Ron and Hermione added their perspectives, with Hermione visibly troubled as she described her actions under the Imperious Curse. The mention of the unforgivable curse elicited strong reactions. Lily Potter embraced Hermione, consoling her and assuring her it wasn't her fault. Neville's account filled in the gaps, explaining his suspicions about Hermione's behavior and seeking out Professor Lupin. His voice shook as he described the confrontation with the Death Eaters and Lupin's transformation. Throughout the testimonies, Harry listened intently, noting discrepancies and points of interest. He observed the Aurors doing the same, their quick quills scratching furiously on parchment. Finally, all eyes turned to Harry. Amelia leaned forward. Harry, we'd like to hear your account now. How did you become aware of the situation, and what did you do? Harry launched into his carefully crafted narrative, describing how he had spotted Neville and Lupin entering the Forbidden Forest from the Ravenclaw common room windows and decided to investigate. He detailed his discovery of the Death Eaters torturing Lupin, his strategic decision to rescue Charles and his friends first, and the ensuing battle. After subduing the Lestrange brothers and Pettigrew, I went after Bellatrix, Harry continued. We dueled briefly, but Professor Lupin's transformation interrupted us, allowing Bellatrix to escape. I had to subdue the professor first to ensure Neville's safety. By the time I resumed the chase, Bellatrix had ample head start and I could not locate her. I suspect she disapparated beyond Hogwarts wards to safety. When the Dementors arrived, I returned to help the others fend them off. As Harry finished his account, a heavy silence fell over the room. Many were awed that Harry had defeated 4 Death Eaters, 3 of whom were Voldemort's fiercest generals. They could foresee Harry becoming a wizard more powerful than Dumbledore. However, Harry noted Dumbledore's less than pleased expression, likely grappling with the realization that the child he had once abandoned was now a formidable wizard capable of besting Bellatrix Lestrange. The more power Harry demonstrated, the more it highlighted the fallacy of Dumbledore's past decisions. James and Lily wore expressions of mingled sadness and pride. Sirius beamed with pride. Great job, Harry. You even bested my cousin Bella. She hates running from a fight, and you forced her to it. Grandfather will be thrilled. Flitwick chimed in, it seems you've made great progress in dueling, Harry. Perhaps we can prepare for the European tournament this summer after your owls. Harry humbly accepted the praise and expressed interest in the dueling tournament, remembering how last summer's event had been suspended due to the Death Eaters' escape. Amelia cleared her throat. Thank you, Harry. Your actions tonight were incredibly brave, if somewhat reckless. We'll need to discuss the repercussions of running into danger without asking for help from Aurors, but that can wait for another time. Harry smiled sheepishly while Sirius chuckled. Amelia turned to Dumbledore. Albus, I must leave now. I need to issue alerts for Pettigrew and Bellatrix Lestrange. Minister, please inform me when you decide how to handle the Lestrange brothers' bodies. Fudge was visibly displeased with the news of the Lestrange siblings' fate, particularly since the Dementors he had deployed were responsible for their fate worse than death. He knew his supporters from the Dark faction would be unhappy. The minister looked at Harry with barely concealed anger, seemingly blaming him for not returning in time to save the Lestranges from the Dementors. However, Fudge knew he couldn't act against Harry without just cause, lest he face the wrath of the Black family, Amelia Bones, and their numerous supporters. Before Harry could address Fudge's hostile look, Sirius intervened, leading his godson out of the room. He knew Harry must have omitted many details and was eager to hear the full story in private. As they left Dumbledore's office, Harry couldn't shake the feeling that the interrogations were far from over. The hostile glance from Minister Fudge lingered in his mind, suggesting that there might be further attempts to question or even challenge his actions. However, despite this lingering unease, Harry wasn't concerned. He knew that he had strong backing within the ministry. The Black and Potter family's influence, coupled with Amelia's support and the respect he'd earned from many in the wizarding world through their children at Hogwarts, formed a formidable shield against any potential political maneuvering. Even if Fudge attempted to pursue some form of action against him, Harry was confident that his allies would stand firm. If Fudge did attempt to challenge him, Harry was prepared to fight back. In fact, he mused, next year might be the perfect time to end the minister's political career if he pushed too far. Chapter 207, Aftershocks and Small Troubles. As Harry and Sirius exited the headmaster's office, they made their way towards an empty classroom. Sirius, his voice low, began explaining the political undercurrents at play. Harry, Sirius murmured, his eyes darting around to ensure they weren't overheard, Fudge isn't happy with you. The whole situation with the Lestranges has put him in a tight spot. They paused at an intersection, and Sirius continued. Expect some trouble, but nothing we can't handle. The extinction of an old pureblood line, indirectly caused by his own actions with the Dementors, won't sit well with many of his supporters. He's walking a tightrope right now. Harry shrugged, unconcerned. I'm not worried at all, Sirius. Even if you and Amelia can't stop the minister from putting me on trial, and for some bizarre reason I end up getting Azkaban, I could always escape. With my strength and knowledge of the Muggle world, no one in the wizarding world can find me. Sirius chuckled, though his eyes remained serious. It won't come to that, but I'm glad you have backup plans. You could also seek asylum in other wizarding countries. They'd welcome a Potter with open arms. Once inside the classroom, far from prying portraits, they cast Muffliato charm, enveloping the room in a bubble of privacy. Now, Sirius said, leaning against a desk, his eyes gleaming with curiosity, tell me everything. Don't leave out a single detail. Harry organized his thoughts and began his tale, describing the fight with the Lestrange brothers in vivid detail. When he got to Pettigrew's sneak attack, Sirius's face darkened, his hands clenching into fists. That rat, Sirius growled, his voice low and dangerous. He's signed his death warrant. To think he'd use the killing curse on you. Harry continued, describing how his wand had acted independently to deflect the killing curse. Sirius's eyes widened in amazement. Merlin's beard, Harry! He exclaimed. A wand acting on its own to protect its master from the killing curse? Even with wands with Thunderbird feather cores, that's unheard of. You must be favored by magic itself. I'm jealous. Harry couldn't help but grin at his godfather's reaction. Oh, and I might have given Wormtail a few extra punches, just for good measure, he added, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Sirius's bark-like laugh filled the room. That's my godson. I hope you made them count. As Harry continued his tale, describing his duel with Bellatrix, subduing Moony, and then capturing Bellatrix, Sirius listened with rapt attention. His eyes lit up when Harry mentioned sending Bellatrix to Arcturus. Excellent work, Harry! Sirius exclaimed, clapping him on the shoulder. We can get to the Horcrux now and end Voldemort's immortality. I'll visit Grandfather tonight to see if he needs help. His expression turned serious. You should stay here, though. Your absence would be noticed, especially after everything that's happened. Harry nodded in agreement, then went on to describe watching the Lestrange brothers being kissed and Pettigrew's narrow escape. Sirius listened grimly, nodding slowly. They're better off dead, he said quietly. If caught, they'd only escape again. There's no redeeming monsters like that. He sighed heavily. It's a pity about the rat, though. I might try tracking him later, like I did years ago on that Halloween night. Maybe I'll have the same luck this time. As Harry finished his story, Sirius stood up, his mind clearly racing with plans. Great job as usual, Harry. I've got to go now. There's a lot to be done. Stay safe, and keep your mirror close. I'll be in touch soon. With a final squeeze of Harry's shoulder, Sirius left, his footsteps fading away down the corridor. Harry remained in the classroom for a few moments before heading back to his dormitory. When he arrived, he found Reggie and Roger waiting up for him, their faces a mixture of concern and curiosity. Harry suppressed a sigh, realizing he was in for another long night of explanations. As he settled into his bed, he began his tale once more, knowing this was just the first of many retellings he'd have to give to his friends in the coming days. The next morning at breakfast, whispers and odd glances followed Harry. His defeat of 4 Death Eaters much more comprehensively than Halloween night had elevated him to near mythical status among the students. Even his few remaining enemies seemed to shrink away, realizing the futility of crossing him. As Harry ate his breakfast, trying to ignore the stares and whispers, he couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversation from nearby tables. He subdued 3 Death Eaters single-handedly. Even Bellatrix Lestrange couldn't beat him and ran away in fear. Wonder if he could teach us some of those spells. Just as Harry was finishing his meal, hoping to make a quick exit, he saw Professor McGonagall approaching, her face set in a tight expression that immediately put him on alert. "Mr. Potter," she said, "your presence is required in the headmaster's office immediately." Harry nodded and followed McGonagall out of the Great Hall. Entering the headmaster's office, Harry immediately noticed the unusual gathering. Alongside Dumbledore stood Auror Dawlish and several of his colleagues, none of whom Harry recognized as allies of Amelia and Sirius. The atmosphere was tense, and Harry could sense that something was very wrong. Dumbledore spoke first, his voice carefully neutral. "Mr. Potter, these Aurors have some additional questions about last night's events." Before Harry could respond, Dawlish cut in, his tone brusque and authoritative. "We're not asking questions here, Dumbledore. Mr. Potter, you're under arrest on suspicion of murdering Bellatrix Lestrange and Peter Pettigrew. You'll be questioned in Ministry holding cells." Harry felt a surge of anger at the accusation, but he kept his composure, his voice steady as he replied, "Do you have a warrant for my arrest, Auror Dawlish?" Dawlish's face reddened slightly. "We have the Minister's written order. Come quietly, or we'll be forced to use more persuasive methods." Harry remained calm. "The order isn't sufficient, Auror Dawlish," he countered, his voice calm but firm. "If you ask Headmaster Dumbledore, you'll learn that I'm an emancipated adult and Lord Potter-to-be. A minister's order isn't enough to arrest me. Without concrete evidence or catching me in the act, you need to prove to the Wisengamot that I'm suspicious of what you're arresting me for, and only when they sign a warrant can I be arrested. So please, go back." Dawlish's face contorted with frustration, his hand twitching towards his wand. "I don't know about all those legal loopholes. You're coming with us, Mr. Potter, one way or another." The tension in the room was palpable. Harry could see Dumbledore watching the exchange with keen interest, though the headmaster made no move to intervene. Just as it seemed the situation might escalate, the office fireplace suddenly flared to life with emerald flames. Dumbledore's eyebrows raised slightly, a hint of relief in his voice. "It appears we have an unexpected guest," he said mildly. "Let's see who it is, shall we?" From the flames emerged Sirius Black, his face a storm of fury. He'd clearly heard everything through Harry's two-way mirror, and he wasted no time in addressing the situation. "Dawlish," Sirius snapped, his voice cold with anger, "Amelia wants you back at the office immediately. You're guilty of abusing your powers, and your suspension orders are waiting for you." He turned to the other Aurors, his gaze sweeping over them. "That goes for all of you as well. And for your information, Bellatrix was spotted entering Gringotts this morning, and Muggles near Albania saw Pettigrew. Your case against Harry is non-existent." The Aurors' faces fell as the implications of Sirius's words sank in. They knew their careers in the Auror department were likely over. Years of hard work and dedication, gone in an instant. They turned to glare at Dawlish, clearly blaming him for their predicament. Without another word, they filed out of the office, their shoulders slumped in defeat. Dawlish was the last to leave, shooting a venomous look at Harry before he descended the spiral staircase. Sirius approached Harry, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You all right?" he asked quietly, concern evident in his eyes. Harry nodded, a small smile of gratitude on his face. "Thanks, Sirius. I'm fine." Sirius squeezed his shoulder reassuringly, then turned to Dumbledore, his expression hardening. "I expected more from you, Albus. Not protecting a student of your school. Now I believe you are more of a politician than a teacher." Dumbledore sighed, his usual twinkle dimmed. "My hands are tied, Sirius. You know my relationship with the minister is not as good as it was." Sirius ignored Dumbledore's lame excuse and after exchanging a few quiet words with Harry departed using the same flue. As Harry turned to leave, he caught Dumbledore watching him, blue eyes twinkling enigmatically behind his half-moon spectacles. Harry couldn't help but wonder what was going through the old man's mind. Over the next few days, the excitement in the castle gradually died down. The story of Harry's confrontation with the Death Eaters was still a popular topic of discussion, but the fervor had lessened. Students returned to their usual routines, although Harry still noticed the occasional odd glance or hushed whisper as he passed. As the attention on him waned, Harry knew it was time to make his move. He needed to visit Black Castle and check on the progress with Bellatrix and the Horcrux. As he made his way to the room of hidden things to use the vanishing cabinet, he couldn't help but wonder why he hadn't been informed of the progress with Bellatrix. The lack of communication from Sirius and Arcturus was unusual, and it gnawed at him. His mind raced with possibilities as he approached the cabinet and opened its doors to enter. Chapter 208, Revelations, Owls, and End of Another Year. Harry stepped into Black Castle, his heart racing with anticipation. The familiar halls echoed with his footsteps as he quickly searched for Arcturus, eager to learn of the progress on the Horcrux. He was certain that by now, Arcturus must have managed to retrieve it. After a brief search, Harry found Arcturus in the study with Sirius, deep in conversation. The absence of Bellatrix was immediately noticeable, and Harry's curiosity piqued. "Hello, Grandfather, Padfoot," Harry greeted them, trying to keep the eagerness from his voice. "What's the topic of discussion?" Sirius grinned, recognizing the barely concealed excitement in his godson's eyes. "Nothing important. But I suspect you're here about a certain cursed object." Harry nodded, a smile tugging at his lips. "Of course. I'm dying to know if my guess about Bellatrix's vault was correct." Arcturus leaned back in his chair, his eyes twinkling with a mixture of pride and amusement. "Your instincts were spot on, Harry. We found Helga Hufflepuff's cup in the vault, transformed into a Horcrux." He paused, stroking his beard thoughtfully. "It seems Riddle had a penchant for founder items. First the Slytherin locket, and now the Hufflepuff cup. We've eliminated 3 of these soul anchors now, and if he created more, I think we should be on the lookout for items related to Ravenclaw and Gryffindor." Sirius nodded enthusiastically. "Great idea. I'll start researching famous items associated with those founders." Harry's eyes gleamed with excitement. "So, have you destroyed the Horcrux yet?" Arcturus shook his head. "Not yet. We've been waiting for you before making that decision. There was no rush, so we didn't call you back immediately." He pointed to a black box on a nearby shelf. "The Horcrux is in there." With reverent care, Harry retrieved the box and placed it on the desk. Opening it revealed the famed cup, a small, golden vessel with 2 finely wrought handles and a badger engraved on the side. Harry's eyes traced the intricate details, his mind recalling the rumors of its magical properties. "It's said to purify anything poured into it," Harry mused aloud. "And drinking from it supposedly provides great nourishment. Some even claim it can amplify the effects of potions." His eyes gleamed with curiosity. "I can't wait to test those theories once this cup is free of the dark soul. Padfoot, do you want to do the honors?" Harry offered, looking at his godfather. Sirius hesitated, his eyes flicking between Harry and the cup. "No, I'm content with the enhancement I've already received." "You should do it, Harry." But Harry shook his head. "I don't really need the boost anymore. I'm already quite powerful, and this enhancement probably wouldn't make a noticeable difference for me." He paused, considering. "If you don't want to, we could offer the opportunity to Amelia or someone else." A lengthy discussion ensued, with all 3 weighing the pros and cons of various options. Eventually, they settled on Sirius destroying the Horcrux. It made the most sense. Harry didn't need it, and involving anyone else would risk exposing their secret. Moreover, they were unsure of any potential long-term side effects of their method of destroying Horcruxes and absorbing the soul power within. With the decision made, Sirius raised his wand. A flash of white light illuminated the room, accompanied by an unearthly scream. When the light faded, the cup sat innocently on the desk, now free of dark magic. Sirius looked slightly dazed, there was an illusion of new strength that seemed to radiate from him. Harry smiled, hoping this added power would help keep his godfather safe in his dangerous career as an Auror. "Grandfather," he said, turning to Arcturus, "you should keep the cup after it's repaired. Try having your tea with it, it might make it more refreshing." Harry's thoughts turned to Arcturus's longevity. He had already changed things to allow him to live longer than in the canon timeline, but the old man was still old. This train of thought led Harry to consider working on the Philosopher's Stone. He still had the failed product, perhaps he could try to create the real stone and use it to extend Arcturus's life further. It was a project to consider for the future. With the Horcrux matter settled, Harry's curiosity about Bellatrix resurfaced. "Where is Bellatrix?" he asked. Arcturus's face became unreadable. "Bellatrix Lestrange née Black is no more," he said cryptically. Harry nodded slowly, understanding the implication. So you somehow gave her a new life. He didn't think Arcturus would kill Bellatrix, she was his granddaughter, after all. But Harry knew from the spells he'd seen in the Black family grimoire that Arcturus could very well wipe her memories and use rituals to give Bellatrix a new identity, face, and a fresh start. Arcturus confirmed Harry's suspicion. Yes. But that's all I can tell you. I want her fate to remain a secret. I'm sorry I took the decision without asking your opinion, Harry. You were the one who captured her, after all. Harry waved off the apology. No worries. I don't have a big grudge against her anyway. With this matter resolved, Harry returned to Hogwarts, his mind now fully focused on his upcoming OWL exams. The fate of Bellatrix faded to the back of his mind. The final weeks at Hogwarts passed in a whirlwind of intense study and preparation. Then the ministry officials came to conduct the exams with all the fanfare. The stress levels of all of Harry's friends were high while Harry still calmly just did a few last-minute revisions of theory. Then the exam days arrived and flew by in no time. Harry breezed through the theory exams and left the ministry invigilators in awe during the practicals. His silent casting and occasional displays of wandless magic during the practical exams left the examiners gobsmacked, many of them unable to perform such feats themselves. As the owls concluded, and before the students could have enough fun, the school year drew to a close. The Hufflepuff team as expected clinched the Quidditch Cup, a feat which left Professor Sprout with a smile on her face for the whole last week of the year. She seemed to be showing off the cup to Professor McGonagall, who was very irritated. Her house team was great too, but due to the first match loss in bad weather, they lost the cup. The house cup, however, was secured by the Ravenclaw house by a huge margin, largely thanks to the points Harry had earned for his heroic actions in saving fellow students from the Death Eaters. Those points made it so that no matter how much effort the other students put in, they never had any real chances of winning the cup for their house. There were only house points though. Harry did not win any school awards like he did last year for his actions. Harry had no idea why. With the school year drawing to a close, Harry and his friends packed their belongings, a mixture of relief and excitement for the summer ahead evident on their faces. They had all performed admirably in their owls, but the weight of exam preparation and the stress of the tests themselves had taken its toll. As Harry boarded the Hogwarts Express for the journey home, his mind was already racing with thoughts of the summer ahead. The European dueling tournament loomed on the horizon, promising fierce competition and a chance for Harry to further hone his skills. And beyond that, the Quidditch World Cup beckoned, an event Harry knew would mark the beginning of a new chapter in the ongoing struggle against Voldemort and his followers. As the train pulled out of Hogsmeade Station, Harry gazed out the window at the receding castle. The summer awaited, full of promise and potential danger. But for now, as the Scottish countryside rolled by, Harry allowed himself to relax and enjoy the company of his friends. There would be time enough for battles and strategies later. For now, he was content listening to jokes, the weight of the wizarding world temporarily lifted from his shoulders. Chapter 209, Summer Beginnings and Tournament Preparations. The first few days of summer at Black Castle passed in a blur of relaxation and preparation. Harry, finally free from the pressures of owls and school, allowed himself a brief respite. He spent mornings flying in his Thunderbird form, reveling in the freedom of the open skies. Afternoons were dedicated to casual dueling practice with Sirius and refining his control over his newfound lightning abilities. As July approached, excitement began to build. The European Dueling Championship loomed on the horizon, promising fierce competition and a true test of Harry's skills. Harry also badly needed the dueling experience to handle the battles he was expecting this year, with the mayhem during the Quidditch World Cup and the potential battle with Voldemort if he revives successfully during the third task of the Triwizard Tournament. To prepare for the tournament, Master Flitwick invited Harry to his residence for some extra practice. Flitwick had a dueling arena constructed in his home, providing Harry with a real dueling experience. Flitwick's home was modest, similar to the one Harry's grandmother had gifted him in her will, which he now occasionally visited. However, Flitwick's residence was a bit more special, housing a huge library and the aforementioned dueling arena. There were also some goblin weapons in the arena, hinting at Flitwick's diverse martial background. At Flitwick's home, the diminutive professor went all out in their duels. Knowing Harry could handle Death Eaters, Flitwick taught him to the fullest, pushing Harry to his limits. Harry, witnessing Flitwick's true strength for the first time, accepted that even though he was now strong, he was still not a match for a serious duelist in a legal duel. He still had much to learn. However, Harry knew that if he used his other advantages like his knight strength and speed, he could potentially win. After identifying Harry's weaknesses, Flitwick put him through rigorous paces. "Remember, Harry," Flitwick advised during one particularly grueling session, his high-pitched voice serious, "this isn't like the junior leagues or even the All-England tournament. Here you will be taking on some of the best duelists in the world. This tournament is more prestigious, and you'll see duelists from all walks of life with unique styles fighting for the coveted championship. You'll be facing fully qualified adult wizards, some with decades of experience. Don't let your guard down for a moment." Harry nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "I understand, Professor. I'm ready for this." This intensive training continued for a couple of weeks. The tournament was scheduled for the third week of August, and by that time, Harry had started to keep up with Flitwick. He won occasionally, but he wasn't proud of these victories, knowing that the professor was now past his prime. The day of departure arrived swiftly. Harry, Sirius, and Flitwick gathered at Flitwick's place, trunks packed and anticipation high. This was not a one-day event. Like the Under-17 European Championship he had participated in a couple of years back, this tournament was also going to span 3 days. Again, no extended family this time, as everyone was busy with the loose Death Eaters and the upcoming Quidditch World Cup. Even Sirius had found it difficult to get leave to accompany Harry. "Got everything, pup?" Sirius asked, ruffling Harry's hair affectionately, which really annoyed Harry, eliciting a glare in response. "If you don't stop doing that, I'll give you a first-hand experience of what I've learned for this tournament," Harry warned, only half joking. Sirius laughed and withdrew his hand. Flitwick watched this banter with an amused smile on his face. With a crack of apparition, they vanished, reappearing moments later in the Ministry of Magic, from where they took the official porte-quay out of the country. This time, the porte-quay transported Harry and his group to the bustling magical district of Paris. The city buzzed with energy, witches and wizards from across the continent converging for the prestigious tournament. They made their way to the Grand Hotel Magic, where the tournament organizers had set up registration. This tournament was far more organized and grander than previous ones, with the organizers even providing accommodation for the contestants and their guests. As they approached the desk, Harry couldn't help but notice the double takes and whispers that followed him. His reputation, it seemed, had preceded him. This was expected since Harry was no longer a newbie to the scene. He had participated in the England tournament last year, which got cancelled midway. However, this wasn't the main reason for his reputation. The fact that he had defeated 3 strong Death Eaters had significantly boosted his fame. Now everyone knew he was no ordinary kid. "Name?" the bored-looking witch at the registration desk asked. "Hadrian Potter," he replied, trying to ignore the sudden hush that fell over the nearby crowd. The witch's eyes widened slightly, but she quickly regained her composure. "Ah, yes. Mr. Potter. Here's your information packet. The opening ceremony is tomorrow evening at the Palais de Duel." As they made their way to their rooms, Flitwick began reviewing the tournament format. "It's a combination of group stages and knockout rounds," he explained, his excitement evident in his squeaky voice. "You'll start in a group of 4. The top 2 from each group proceed to the knockout stages." Sirius chimed in, his eyes gleaming with anticipation, "and the rules are pretty lax. No unforgivables or lethal spells, of course, but beyond that, almost anything goes, even dark magic. It's as close to real combat as you can get in a tournament setting." Harry nodded, his mind already racing with strategies. "Sounds exciting. I can't wait." The next evening, they made their way to the Palais de Duel, a magnificent structure that seemed to blend classical French architecture with magical enhancements. Inside, the Grand Hall was abuzz with competitors and spectators alike. It was a temporary but grand structure built specifically for this prestigious tournament. The tournament organizer, a tall, elegant witch named Madame Rousseau, took the stage. Her voice, magically amplified, echoed through the hall. "Welcome, duelists and honored guests, to the 127th European Dueling Championship." She paused, allowing the excitement to build. "Over the next week, we will witness displays of magical prowess that will go down in history. May the best witch or wizard prevail." As the crowd cheered, Harry felt a thrill of excitement course through him. This was his chance to revive the Potter name on the international stage. As he looked around at his fellow competitors, he knew the road ahead would be challenging. Many of his competitors had strong auras, and Harry knew he was going to have many exciting and thrilling duels. As the opening ceremony concluded and the competitors began to mingle, Harry found himself the center of attention. Duelists from across Europe approached him, some seeking to size up their competition, others hoping to catch a glimpse of the young wizard who had faced down Death Eaters. Harry handled the attention with grace, making mental notes about potential opponents and their demeanors. Later that night, as Harry lay in his bed at the Hotel Magic, his mind raced with possibilities. Tomorrow, the real challenge would begin. As he drifted off to sleep, his last thoughts were of the duels to come and the chance to better his skills on the grand stage. Chapter 210, Group Stages and Early Victories. The morning of the first matches dawned bright and clear. Harry awoke early, his nerves tingling with anticipation. After a light breakfast and a pep talk from both Sirius and Flitwick, he made his way to the Palais de Duel. The interior had been transformed overnight. Where there had been a grand ballroom, now stood multiple dueling platforms, each surrounded by shimmering protective barriers. Spectators filled the stands, their excited chatter creating a constant buzz of background noise. Harry couldn't help but compare it with the 2 other dueling tournaments he had attended. Everything was superior, the venue, the audience, and the palpable excitement. He was ready for battle. Harry's group consisted of 4 duelists, himself, a stoic Russian wizard named Dmitry Volkov, a flamboyant Italian witch called Lucia Caruso, and a methodical German duelist, Hans Schmidt. As the youngest by far, Harry could feel the skeptical glances from his opponents. They had heard he was an under-17 European dueling champion who had bested some Death Eaters, but this wasn't enough to deter duelists with over 7 years of experience. Harry's first match was against Lucia. As they took their positions, she flashed him a dazzling smile. "Try not to cry when you lose, Piccolo," she teased. Harry's response was a slight smile and a nod. She wasn't his enemy, there was no need to respond and antagonize his opponent. The commentator's voice boomed through the arena. "Ladies and gentlemen, our next match pits the young prodigy Hadrian Potter against the dazzling Lucia Caruso." As soon as the starting signal sounded, Harry was in motion. Lucia's style was all flash and showmanship, her spells bright and attention-grabbing. But Harry had faced far worse than pretty lights. With a series of quick, precise movements, Harry dismantled Lucia's defenses. Her spells were showy but lacked power. When Harry applied a little effort, her defenses crumbled. Harry played around, learning Lucia's spells and assessing their usefulness. When he'd had enough, he decided to end it. A well-timed Expelliarmus miss, hidden in the wake of a more showy spell, caught her off guard. Her wand flew from her hand and out of the dueling platform. Unbelievable. Potter ends the match with a textbook Expelliarmus miss. Caruso never saw it coming. The match was over in less than 3 minutes. The crowd, initially buzzing with excitement over Lucia's spectacular display, fell silent for a moment before erupting in cheers. Lucia stared at Harry in shock as she was handed back her wand. "How, that's impossible," she muttered, unable to believe she'd been so easily defeated by a 16-year-old. As Harry walked away from the platform, he could sense more eyes on himself. His status had now been elevated from a lucky kid to a somewhat difficult kid in their minds. Harry's next match, against Hans, proved a little more challenging. The German style was the polar opposite of Lucia's all-efficiency and precision. Schmidt opens with a barrage of stunners. But Potter's shield charm holds strong. The commentator shouted over the crowd's roars. For several minutes, they traded spells, neither gaining a clear advantage. Harry was going easy in the early stages, here to learn and grow, not bulldoze his way to the top. It's a deadlock, folks. Neither duelist is giving an inch. After a few minutes, Harry saw an opening and decided to end it. As Hans cast a particularly complex shield charm, Harry unleashed a barrage of lightning-fast stunners. Merlin's beard. Potter's wand is a blur. I've never seen spells cast this quickly. The rapid-fire assault overwhelmed Hans's defenses, and he fell to the platform, stunned. It's over. Potter takes down Schmidt with a stunning display of speed and precision. The final group match against Dmitry was the toughest yet. The Russian favored powerful, brutal spells that tested the limits of what was allowed in the tournament. Volkov's spells are shaking the very platform. But Potter stands firm. Harry found himself on the defensive more than he liked, forced to conjure physical barriers to block spells that would shatter most magical shields. But Harry had an ace up his sleeve. As Dmitry prepared for another devastating attack, Harry appeared to have dissipated with a crack. Potter's vanished. No, wait. It's an illusion. This was just an illusion spell Harry used to hide his presence. When his opponent was confused, he reappeared behind him. Before Dimitri could react, Harry had disarmed him and bound him in conjured ropes. Incredible! Potter wins with a display of magical prowess rarely seen in one so young. The crowd went wild. Harry had won all his group matches in spectacular fashion. As he left the platform, whispers spread through the audience. Did you see that? He's just a kid. Could he actually win this thing? Sirius was beaming with pride as Harry returned to their viewing box. Brilliant work, pup. You've got them all talking now. Flitwick nodded in agreement, though his expression was more measured. Excellent performance, Harry. But remember, the real challenge begins in the knockout stages. Your opponents will only get tougher from here. Harry nodded, accepting a bottle of water from an organizer. I know, Professor. I'm ready for it. As the day's matches concluded, the brackets for the knockout stages were announced. Harry found himself facing a former French auror in the round of 32, a man with a reputation for cunning tactics and unpredictable spell combinations. That night, as Harry lay in bed reviewing his performance and planning for the next day, he felt a surge of excitement for the upcoming matches. He had passed the first hurdle with flying colors, but the real test was yet to come. The knockout stages would provide more promising competition. But a sleep finally claimed him, a small smile played on his lips. He was Harry Potter, and there was no challenge he couldn't overcome. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new lessons, and new opportunities to prove himself on the grand stage of European dueling. Chapter 211, Rising Through the Ranks. The knockout stages of the European Dueling Championship brought a new level of intensity to the competition. The Paletta duel thrummed with energy as spectators and competitors alike anticipated the day's matches. Harry's first opponent in the round of 32 was Jean-Pierre Dubois, a former French auror known for his unpredictable dueling style. As they took their positions on the platform, Harry could feel the weight of expectation from the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a treat for you today. The commentator's voice boomed. The young prodigy Hadrian Potter faces off against the unpredictable Jean-Pierre Dubois. The duel began, and immediately Harry understood Dubois' reputation. The Frenchman's spells came in erratic patterns, mixing standard dueling fare with obscure jinxes and hexes. Incroyable. Dubois opens with a barrage of spells I've never seen before. The commentator exclaimed. Potter is on the defensive, folks. For the first few minutes, Harry found himself purely on the defensive, conjuring shields and dodging spells. But as the duel wore on, he began to see the method in Dubois' madness. There was a rhythm to the chaos, a pattern hidden beneath the apparent randomness. Wait a moment. Potter seems to have found his footing. He's anticipating Dubois' moves now. Seizing his moment, Harry launched a counterattack. He interspersed his own unpredictable spells with carefully timed lightning attacks, the crackling energy catching Dubois off guard. Sacre bleu! Potter is wielding lightning itself. I've never seen anything like it. With a final, powerful burst of lightning, Harry shattered Dubois' shield and disarmed him in one fluid motion. The crowd erupted in cheers as Harry was declared the winner. C'est incroyable, Dubois muttered as they shook hands, his accent thick with admiration. You have a bright future, young man. As Harry and Dubois stepped down from the platform, they were met by a man accompanied by a familiar beauty, Fleur Delacour, who had only grown more enchanting since Harry last saw her. Fleur's eyes flashed with indignation as she addressed Harry, her English accented but clear. Why were you not at the Under-17 Championship last year? You ran away from our promised battle. I was waiting to take my revenge. Harry replied with a small smile playing on his lips. Nice to meet you too, Miss Delacour. But as you can see, the Under-17 tournament was no longer a challenge for me. For greater duels and more chances to learn, I began participating in the adult dueling scene. Before Fleur could retort, the man beside her interjected. Fleur, I did not know you were familiar with Monsieur Potter, he said, his tone curious. Fleur tossed her silvery hair, her frustration evident. I am not familiar with him, Papa. He just defeated me in a duel with a sneak attack and did not participate last year when I wanted to take my revenge. Dubois, still catching his breath from the duel, chimed in. I am sorry to break it to you, Mademoiselle Delacour, but you are no match for young Monsieur Potter heir. As you can see, he defeated me fair and square in a duel. Fleur's eyes narrowed. That doesn't mean I cannot defeat him. Even you lost to me one time. Dubois' face reddened slightly, remembering how he, like many others, had fallen victim to her uncontrolled allure. Fla's father, sensing the tension, addressed Harry. "I am sorry about this, Monsieur Potter, to keep you here. You can go ahead and have some rest for your next battle. Fleur, if you want to defeat Monsieur Potter, you will have a chance later in the year. Be patient." Fla's eyes lit up with curiosity. "Really? Is this the secret you are keeping from me? Why can't you just tell me the secret?" Harry just smiled and walked away, knowing Monsieur Delacour was referring to the Triwizard Tournament. But Harry's mind was already focused on the events that would unfold around the tournament, rather than the competition itself. Back at his resting area, he was met with a grinning Sirius. "Who was that, Harry? Have you got your first fan? She's really beautiful." Harry chuckled. "Not a fan. Just a sore loser from a previous tournament. You remember Fleur Delacour, don't you?" Sirius' eyes widened in recognition. "The Vila who defeated everyone with her allure? But this doesn't look like a coincidence. Maybe she likes you and wants an excuse to talk to you." Harry shook his head, amused. "Whatever. I don't have time for relationships. Becoming stronger is more important." Sirius sighed dramatically. "You're boring, you know that, Harry." The round of 16 brought Harry face to face with Anastasia Petrova, a fierce Russian witch with a penchant for elemental magic. As they bowed to each other, Harry could feel the air around her shimmer with heat. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have Hadrian Potter, the young lightning wielder, facing off against Anastasia Petrova, the mistress of elemental magic," the commentator announced, his voice filled with excitement. The duel began, and Anastasia immediately conjured a ring of fire around herself. Flames lashed out like whips, forcing Harry to stay mobile. Incredible! Petrova has surrounded herself with a ring of fire. How will Potter respond? Harry countered with jets of water and gusts of wind, turning the platform into a maelstrom of elemental fury. Steam hissed and billowed as water met fire, creating a foggy battlefield. It's like watching the forces of nature themselves do battle. Potter and Petrova are evenly matched. For several intense minutes, they traded blows, neither gaining a clear advantage. Petrova's fire snaked out in tendrils, seeking to ensnare Harry, while his lightning crackled and danced, threatening to pierce her defenses. The air itself is charged with magic. I've never seen such a display of elemental control. Then Harry saw his opening. As Anastasia prepared a particularly large fireball, gathering flames between her hands, he made his move. Petrova is charging up for a massive attack. This could be the end for Potter. In a crack of displaced air, Harry disappeared once again in a duel, leaving the audience gasping in shock. Potter's vanished. Where could he be? He reappeared directly above Anastasia, his wand already in motion. A powerful water charm erupted from its tip, a veritable deluge descending upon the Russian witch. Merlin's beard. Potter's above her. It's raining on the dueling platform. Steam exploded outward as the water extinguished Anastasia's flames. In the moment of confusion, Harry struck again. A quick expelliarmus miss ended the match, Anastasia's wand flying into his waiting hand. The crowd was on its feet, roaring with approval. Harry had just defeated one of the tournament favorites in a display of magical mastery rarely seen from one so young. It's over. Potter wins in spectacular fashion. The commentator exclaimed, his voice echoing through the arena. But wait, what's this? Potter is hovering above the platform. The spectators gasped and murmured in awe as they watched Harry floating effortlessly a few feet above the dueling stage. The sight of a wizard suspended in midair without a broom was uncommon enough to draw attention, even if it wasn't entirely unheard of. Recognizing that he might have revealed more than intended, Harry quickly descended to the platform. He had only meant to demonstrate a brief moment of levitation, not to showcase any extraordinary flying abilities. After all, while many skilled wizards could manage a short hover, true flight was a rare and closely guarded skill. As he touched down, Harry maintained a composed expression, acting as if the brief display of levitation was nothing out of the ordinary. He knew that while impressive, this demonstration wasn't revealing any of his more potent secrets. The ability to actually fly unaided would remain hidden for now, a trump card to be used only when absolutely necessary. As Harry progressed through the tournament, whispers began to circulate. Some claimed he was the second coming of Dumbledore, others whispered that he must be using dark magic to achieve such feats at his age. But all agreed on one thing: Harry Potter was a force to be reckoned with, and the dueling world would never be the same. Chapter 212, Quarterfinals, Water, Ice, and Lightning. The quarterfinals of the European Dueling Championship had arrived, and the Paletta duel was buzzing with anticipation. Harry's opponent this time was Magnus Svensson, a Swedish wizard renowned for his mastery over water magic. As they took their positions on the platform, the commentator's voice boomed through the arena. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have an exciting matchup for you today. The young prodigy Hadrian Potter faces off against the Master of Water, Magnus Svensson." The duel began, and immediately Magnus unleashed a torrent of water spells. Jets of water shot towards Harry from all directions, but Harry was ready. Incredible! Svensson opens with a barrage of water spells, but Potter seems unfazed. "It looks like our young lightning wielder has a plan." Seeing the bursts of water coming at him, Harry responded with a quick succession of lightning spells, each bolt aimed precisely at the incoming water. The electricity used the water as a conduit, traveling back to Magnus faster than he could react. Magnus was electrocuted and nearly dropped his wand, his body convulsing from the shock. Unbelievable! Potter is using Svensson's own spells against him. The lightning is following the water right back to its source. This is a master class in elemental manipulation. Magnus found himself on the defensive, unable to land a single hit on Harry. Each spell he cast became a potential weapon for his opponent, and there was no way to defend against the lightning. Frustration began to show on his face as he realized his usual tactics were useless. He was now numb with the number of times he had been electrocuted, his limbs twitching involuntarily. Svensson seems to be at a loss. His go-to strategy is backfiring spectacularly. Can the Water Master find a way to counter Potter's electrifying offense? In a desperate move, Magnus began casting water spells all around the platform, drenching every surface. The arena floor became slick and treacherous, small puddles forming in every crevice. What's this? Svensson is flooding the entire platform. But why? Surely he knows this won't stop Potter's lightning but instead help him? What could the Swedish wizard be planning? Harry watched curiously, unsure of Magnus' strategy. The water-soaked platform offered no protection against his lightning spells, and Magnus wasn't immune to electricity. Now Magnus could not move forward, or else he would become easy prey for Harry's lightning spells. Suddenly, Magnus' face broke into a triumphant grin. "I was saving this for the finals," he called out, his voice carrying across the arena, "but you leave me no choice." With a complex wand movement, Magnus took control of all the water in the stadium. It rose up, forming a massive tsunami wave over Harry that completely surrounded him, a wall of water that seemed to touch the ceiling. Merlin's beard. Svensson has created a huge water wave that is about to crash down on Potter with tremendous force. How will he escape this watery doom? Harry tested the wave with a lightning spell. He was hoping there was still some direct contact between Svensson and the water so he could end this big display of magic in an instant. But to his surprise, the electricity remained trapped within the water wave, unable to reach Magnus. The lightning arced and danced within the water, creating a spectacular light show but doing no damage to his opponent. Potter's lightning is contained inside the wave. For the first time in this tournament, his signature move has been neutralized. Has Svensson found the key to defeating the lightning prodigy? Magnus laughed at Harry's apparent helplessness. "Not so powerful now, are you?" he taunted, preparing for his final attack. His voice was filled with confidence, believing he had finally found a way to best the young duelist. The entire curtain of water began to fall towards Harry, threatening to sweep him out of the stadium. The roar of the approaching water was deafening, drowning out the gasps and shouts of the audience. This could be the end for Potter. That much water could easily knock him out of bounds. Is this the end of his championship run? But Harry remained calm, his mind racing through possible countermeasures. With a wave of his wand and a look of intense concentration, he cast a powerful freezing charm. The wave started to freeze under the watchful eyes of the audience, and within seconds, the falling water turned to solid ice. The transformation was breathtaking, the once fluid wave now a glittering, frozen sculpture suspended in mid-air. Incredible! Potter has frozen Svensson's attack mid-air. The arena has become a winter wonderland. Before Magnus could recover from his shock, Harry cast another spell, shattering the frozen curtain into thousands of wand-sized icicles. Due to the shattering, each icicle had a sharp edge that looked deadly, glinting menacingly in the arena lights. The tables have turned. Potter has transformed Svensson's own attack into a weapon. This is magic beyond anything we've seen in this tournament. With precise wand movements, Harry directed the icicle storm towards Magnus. The Swedish wizard tried to defend himself, casting shield charms and attempting to melt the ice, but after a few hits, his shields began to falter. The icy projectiles were too numerous and too fast for him to counter effectively. Svensson is under attack from his own water, now turned to ice. His defenses are crumbling. Can he withstand this frozen onslaught? After taking several hits, Magnus' shield broke. Before another icicle could pierce him, Magnus raised his hand in surrender. "I yield," he shouted, not wanting to be impaled by the ice barrage and risk serious injury. He had understood that he had no chance of winning against this level of magical control and creativity. Harry immediately halted his attack, the remaining icicles hanging suspended in the air. But he wasn't done yet. With another wave of his wand, he sent the remaining icicles into the sky and made them crash into each other. This created a spectacular ice firework display. The shards caught the light, creating a dazzling show that had the audience gasping in awe. It was a beautiful end to an intense duel, showcasing not just Harry's power but his artistry with magic. What a finish! Potter not only wins the duel but gives us a magnificent light show as well. This young wizard continues to astonish us all. Ladies and gentlemen, we are witnessing history in the making. The crowd erupted in cheers as Harry was declared the victor. As he left the platform, whispers followed him. He had not only won but had done so with style and creativity, turning his opponent's strength into a weakness. Magnus approached Harry as they left the arena, his expression a mixture of admiration and frustration. "That was impressive," he admitted grudgingly. "I've never seen anyone counter my water magic like that before. You turned my greatest strength against me." Harry smiled, offering his hand in a gesture of sportsmanship. "It was a great duel. Your water curtain was brilliant, I've never faced anything like it. You are strong, but unluckily you got matched against someone with a counter to your magic spells." Magnus nodded, accepting the handshake. "Thank you for the praise. However, I did learn some things from the fight. If it works, I won't be as useless against lightning in the future. Best of luck for your next matches. Win the whole thing." Harry guessed Magnus was going to learn ice spells now. If he did learn them successfully, he was going to be a force to reckon with in future tournaments. As Harry made his way back to Sirius and Flitwick, he could hear the excited chatter of the crowd. He had just secured his place in the semi-finals, and anticipation for his next match was already building. Flitwick beamed at his protégé, his eyes shining with pride. "Excellent work, Harry. Your quick thinking and spell combination were superb. The way you turned his water into ice and then weaponized it, simply magnificent. Now there are only 2 people between you and the championship. Your next opponents will be even tougher. They'll be prepared for your lightning now." Harry nodded, already considering strategies for his upcoming matches. "I know, Professor. I'll be ready. I've got a few more tricks up my sleeve." As they left the Palais de Duel, Harry couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement coursing through him. He was 2 matches away from potentially becoming the European dueling champion. But more importantly, he was learning and growing with each duel, becoming stronger and more skilled. The semi-finals would bring new challenges, new opponents with their own unique styles and strengths. Whatever they might throw at him, Harry Potter was ready to face them head-on, his wand at the ready and his mind sharp. Chapter 213, The Penultimate Challenge. The semi-finals of the European Dueling Championship arrived with a palpable sense of anticipation. The Palais de Duel was packed to capacity, with even standing room becoming a precious commodity. Harry's meteoric rise through the ranks had captured the imagination of the wizarding world, and everyone wanted to see if the young prodigy could continue his incredible run. As Harry entered the arena, the commentator's voice boomed, "Ladies and gentlemen, prepare yourselves for what promises to be a duel of epic proportions. In this corner, we have the young prodigy, the lightning wielder, Hadrian Potter." The crowd erupted in cheers as Harry took his position on the platform. The commentator continued, "And his opponent, the Croatian conjurer, the master of transfiguration, Alexander Kova." Harry's opponent in the semi-final was indeed Alexander Kova, a Croatian duelist known for his mastery of transfiguration in combat. People often compared his dueling style to that of Dumbledore's, a rare and formidable approach that few could master. As they took their positions on the platform, Harry could feel the weight of thousands of eyes upon him, the air thick with anticipation. Kova gave Harry a respectful nod. "I hope you're ready, young Potter. I have watched your duels. You are good, but are you good enough? This won't be like any duel you've faced before. Harry returned the nod, his face set with determination. I look forward to the challenge, Mr. Kova. The referee raised his wand. Duelists at the ready. Begin. The duel began, and immediately Harry understood why Kova was considered one of the best. The platform around them came alive, tiles transforming into snarling beasts, the very air solidifying into razor-sharp shards. Incredible! The commentator shouted. Kova has turned the entire arena into a weapon. Potter finds himself not just fighting Kova, but the entire environment. Harry found himself dodging animated objects and shielding against a constant barrage of transfigured projectiles. Protego Maxima! He shouted, creating a dome-like shield around himself as a transformed bench, now a vicious tiger, leaped at him. Potter's on the defensive, folks. Can he find a way to counter Kova's onslaught? For the first few minutes, Harry was purely on the defensive. But as the duel wore on, he began to see patterns in Kova's strategy, his mind working furiously to formulate a counterattack. Drawing on his own considerable skills in transfiguration, Harry began to counter Kova's creations with his own. Faraverto! He cried, transforming Kova's transfigured lion into a water goblet mid-leap. Astonishing! The commentator exclaimed. Potter is fighting fire with fire, countering Kova's transfigurations with his own. Kova's eyes widened in surprise. Impressive, Potter. But let's see how you handle this. Duro Maxima! The floor beneath Harry's feet began to turn to stone, threatening to encase him. Harry quickly leaped aside, pointing his wand at the encroaching stone. Finite Incantatum! The stone reverted to the original platform material. Harry had enough of defending. It was his turn to attack. He also decided to use transfiguration and put his skill against the best. With a complex wand movement, Harry cast a spell that transformed the tiles on the platform into small rats who quickly scurried to attack Kova. Kova was quick to react and destroyed some of the rats, while others fell victim to a transfigured cat he created. The duel became a breathtaking display of magical creativity, with both duelists constantly adapting and countering each other's moves. The crowd watched in awe as the platform became a swirling chaos of constantly shifting forms and matter. Ladies and gentlemen, I've never seen anything like this. The commentator shouted, his voice hoarse with excitement. It's like watching two master artists duel with magic as their medium. As the duel approached the 20-minute mark, Harry decided it was time to change tactics and end the duel. In a move that caught everyone by surprise, he pointed his wand at the ground and shouted, Sabulosus Terra! The entire platform transformed into a giant pit of quicksand. What's this? Potter has turned the entire platform into a quicksand pit. The commentator cried in disbelief. Suddenly, all of Kova's creations were stuck in the sand, unable to get out and move to attack Harry. Kova's eyes widened in shock. Clever, Potter, very clever. His foot was also stuck in the quicksand and was unable to move. Seeing Kova distracted with getting free from the quicksand, Harry struck. Fulmin Maxima! A bolt of lightning, more powerful than any he had yet produced in the tournament, arced across the platform. Merlin's beard! Potter has unleashed a lightning bolt that would make Zeus jealous. The commentator shouted. Kova, caught off guard by the sudden shift in tactics, barely had time to raise a shield. Protego Horribilis! He cried, but it was too late. The Croatian's hastily erected defense shattered under the onslaught, and he was thrown backwards, free from the quicksand but his wand flying from his hand. As Kova hit the ground, the entire stadium held its breath. For a moment, silence reigned. Then, as the referee raised his hand to declare Harry the victor, the crowd erupted in a deafening roar. It's over. Hadrian Potter has done the impossible. He's defeated Alexander Kova and secured his place in the finals. Harry helped Kova to his feet, both duelists battered and exhausted but filled with mutual respect. That was incredible, Kova panted, shaking Harry's hand. I've never seen anyone counter my transfigurations like that, let alone combine it with such powerful elemental magic. You're truly in a league of your own, Potter. Harry smiled, still catching his breath. Thank you, Mr. Kova. Your mastery of transfiguration is unparalleled. I learned a lot from this duel. As Harry left the platform, he was immediately engulfed by a jubilant Sirius and an ecstatic Flitwick. You've done it, Harry! Sirius shouted over the crowd's continued cheers. You're in the final. Flitwick, practically bouncing with excitement, began immediately analyzing the duel. Brilliant use of transfiguration, Harry. And that final move with the quicksand inspired. The way you combined different branches of magic was truly remarkable. But even as he basked in the glow of his victory, Harry knew the hardest challenge was yet to come. The final would pit him against Viktor Volkov, the reigning European champion and a duelist of fearsome reputation. As he prepared to leave the arena, Harry caught sight of Volkov watching him from across the room. The Russian's face was impassive, but his eyes burned with intensity. A silent message passed between them, both would give their all in the duel. That night, as Harry lay in bed reviewing the day's events, he felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. He had come further than anyone had expected, defying all odds to reach the final. He had been confident in his ability and strength, but some of the duelists had nearly overwhelmed him. The unique styles had forced him to think in the moment and come up with counters. As sleep finally claimed him, Harry's last thoughts were of the challenge that lay ahead. Tomorrow would be the day. The day he would overcome his final opponent and claim the crown of European dueling champion. Harry would show his would-be enemies to fear him and think before crossing him. Other than learning and growing from the dueling experience, a major reason for him competing in tournaments was to gain a fierce reputation that dissuades people from making enemies of himself or targeting his close ones. If they did cross him, he would come after them with all the skill and power he had demonstrated in the arena. Chapter 214, The Final Showdown. The morning of the European Dueling Championship final dawned bright and clear. The Palais duel was a hive of activity, with spectators queuing for hours to secure their seats. The air thrummed with excitement and speculation, the crowd's anticipation palpable. Harry woke early, his mind already racing with strategies and counter-strategies. He went through his usual pre-duel routine, a light breakfast, some gentle stretching, and a brief meditation to center his magic. As he dressed in his dueling robes, he caught sight of his reflection in the mirror. He was in a good state and ready to take on the best Europe had to offer. Sirius and Flitwick accompanied him to the Palais, offering last-minute advice and encouragement. "Remember, Harry," Flitwick squeaked excitedly, his eyes shining with anticipation, "Volkov favors power over subtlety. Use that against him. Your agility and quick thinking could be the key." Sirius simply gripped Harry's shoulder, his eyes shining with pride. "You've got this, pup. Show them what a Potter can do. Your grandparents would be so proud." As they entered the arena, the roar of the crowd was deafening. The stands were packed, with witches and wizards from across Europe eager to witness what promised to be a historic duel. Harry surprisingly spotted several familiar faces in the crowd. His keen eyesight picked out Amelia, Susan, and Ares, waving enthusiastically. Near them were Emma and her husband David, Emma clutching a banner that read "Go, Harry." There had been no talk of them coming to the tournament, but here they were, a pleasant surprise that warmed Harry's heart. He waved back at them happily, his determination to win solidifying. Viktor Volkov stood at the other end of the platform. The Russian champion cut an imposing figure, his battle-scarred face set in a mask of concentration. As their eyes met, Harry felt a jolt of anticipation. This was it, the final. He might have to go all out from the get-go in this duel. Madame Rousseau took the stage, her voice magically amplified. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the final of the 127th European Dueling Championship. On my left, our reigning champion, Viktor Volkov." The crowd roared its approval as Volkov raised his wand in acknowledgement. "And on my right, the surprise of the tournament, Hadrian Potter." The cheer that greeted Harry's name was, if anything, even louder. He had become the crowd favorite, the underdog they were all rooting for. "Duelists, take your positions," Madame Rousseau commanded. Harry and Volkov approached the center of the platform, bowing formally to each other. Volkov's eyes gleamed with respect and challenge. "Let's give them a duel to remember, young Potter," he said, his accent thick but his words clear. Harry nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Indeed, Mr. Volkov. May the best wizard win. Begin." Madame Rousseau's voice rang out. The duel started with explosive intensity. Volkov lived up to his reputation, launching a barrage of spells that lit up the arena with their power. "And they're off," the commentator shouted. Volkov opens with a devastating series of blasting curses. Potter's on the defensive already. Harry found himself immediately on the defensive, conjuring shields and dodging with every ounce of his agility. "Protego Maxima!" he cried, a shimmering barrier erupting from his wand just in time to deflect a particularly nasty hex. For the first few minutes, it seemed Volkov had the upper hand. His spells came relentlessly, each one powerful enough to end the duel if it connected. "Volkov's living up to his reputation, folks," the commentator exclaimed. "He's not giving Potter a moment to breathe." But as had been the pattern in the tournament, Harry finished studying his opponent's style and slowly began to fight back, finding his rhythm. He started to see the patterns in Volkov's attacks, the brief pauses between barrages. Seizing his chance, Harry launched a counterattack. "Fulgur Katina!" he shouted, a chain of lightning erupting from his wand. He mixed standard dueling spells with his signature lightning attacks, the electricity arcing across the platform in brilliant blue flashes. "Merlin's beard!" the commentator cried. "Potter's fighting back with some extraordinary magic. I've never seen lightning wielded like this." Volkov, although well aware of Harry's style of fighting, was caught off guard by the unusual magic. Even though he was ready, facing the lightning waves in reality was difficult, and he was forced to give ground. "Impressivo, Potter!" Volkov called out, a note of admiration in his voice as he conjured a shield to deflect the lightning. "But let's see how you handle this." Ignis Vortex! A swirling vortex of fire erupted from Volkov's wand, threatening to engulf Harry. The duel became a breathtaking display of magical prowess. Volkov's raw power clashed with Harry's innovative techniques, creating spectacular magical effects that had the crowd gasping in awe. Shields shimmered and shattered, transfigured beasts clashed in mid-air, and the very air seemed to crackle with magical energy. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are witnessing history!" the commentator shouted, his voice hoarse with excitement. "Never in my years of commentating have I seen such a display of magical skill and power." As the duel approached the 30-minute mark, both duelists were showing signs of fatigue. Volkov's attacks, while still powerful, were coming less frequently. Harry's movements, though still quick, had lost some of their earlier sharpness. Harry this time was not holding back anything. He was giving it all, but Volkov was able to counter every one of his attacks and was not leaving him an opportunity to end the duel. Then, after a few more exchanges of attacks, in a moment that would be replayed and analyzed for years to come, both duelists struck simultaneously. Volkov unleashed a massive fireball, while Harry countered with a lightning bolt of unprecedented power. "Ignis Maxima!" Volkov roared. "Fullman Ultimatum!" Harry cried. The two spells met in the center of the platform with a thunderous explosion. "Unbelievable!" the commentator screamed. "The very air is alight with magic." For a moment, the entire arena was blinded by the flash. When vision returned, both duelists were still standing, but barely. They stared at each other across the smoking platform, wands raised, each waiting for the other to make the final move. In that moment of stillness, Harry made a move. The flash earlier gave him an inspiration. He jumped into the air and as Volkov watched with high focus, cast the brightest spell he had in his arsenal. "Lumos Solaris!" he shouted. Volkov was caught off guard and completely blinded by the light. "Clever, Potter!" he grunted, casting random shield charms to protect himself. Harry, using this opportunity, went behind the blind Volkov who was casting spells randomly to defend against Harry. "Expelliarmus!" Harry whispered, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. Volkov's wand flew from his hand, arcing high into the air before landing outside the platform. For a moment, silence reigned in the arena. Then, as the reality of what had just happened sank in, the crowd erupted in a deafening roar. "Ladies and gentlemen," Madame Rousseau's voice cut through the noise, "I present to you the new European dueling champion, Hadrian Potter." As the crowd chanted his name, Harry stood in the center of the platform, barely able to believe what had just happened. The battle had been harder than he had anticipated, but he had done it. He had become the youngest European dueling champion in history. Volkov approached him, a newfound respect in his eyes. "Congratulations, young Potter," he said, extending his hand. "You fought with strength and skill. You have earned this victory." As Harry shook Volkov's hand, he felt a surge of emotions, pride, exhaustion, and above all, a sense of accomplishment. He had proven himself on the international stage, showcasing not just his power, but his ingenuity and determination. Now he could really say he had joined the ranks of powerful people in the wizarding world. This was truly a huge accomplishment. As Sirius and Flitwick rushed onto the platform to congratulate him, Harry caught sight of his family in the stands and waved at them. They were joyous, with little Aries Black jumping up and down with joy. He was truly happy watching this sight. His hard work was worth it. Harry knew that his performance here would have far-reaching consequences, both for his own future and for the wizarding world at large. There was a high chance he would lose more of his prophetic advantage in this world, but that was no longer an issue for Harry. He could not be limited by worry about the future. He was strong and trained to be stronger to ensure no amount of change in the future would trouble him. As Harry raised the championship trophy high above his head, he put all his worries away and allowed himself to simply enjoy the moment. He was Harry Potter, the European dueling champion, and he was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Voldemort, you better be ready to face a powerful Harry Potter who does not need any manipulations, external strength, or fate to ensure he wins the final battle. Chapter 215, Summer Days and Owl Results. The summer sun shone brightly over Bones Manor as Harry Potter, recently crowned European dueling champion, found himself in an unexpected role, babysitter. With Sirius and Amelia consumed by preparations for the Quidditch World Cup, Harry had been entrusted with the care of young Aries Black and Susan Bones. Leaving them with house elves was not an option because Sirius and Amelia left early in the morning and came back late at night when the kids were asleep. Higher, Harry. Higher. Aries, now a rambunctious 3-year-old, squealed with delight as Harry guided his toy broom a few feet off the ground. Harry laughed, keeping a watchful eye on Aries. Any higher, mate, and we'll need to get you a real broom. You're becoming quite the daredevil, aren't you? Nearby, Susan zoomed past on Sirius's firebolt, her red hair streaming behind her. Harry! She called out, executing a perfect loop-de-loop. Did you see that move? I've been practicing all summer. Brilliant, Susan! Harry cheered, genuinely impressed. It seems like Hufflepuff is going to be the favorite for winning another Quidditch Cup this year. With your performance better than last year's, you'll be giving other team chasers a run for their money. As he watched Susan and Aries zoom around on their brooms, Harry's mind wandered to the whirlwind of events following his championship win. It began that very day with a small after-event gathering with other duelers and then later that day more celebrations with the special people who had come to cheer for Harry. It was one tiring day by the end of which Harry was completely drained of strength. That's coming from someone who has the enhanced stamina and endurance of a knight. The furor over the tournament win did not end there. After returning home, Harry had been plagued with invitations from many people including those with high status in the ministry to special gatherings. He had respectfully declined as he did not want to enter the political circle until after Hogwarts. This was too soon to appear there. Mr. Potter, one invitation had read, your presence would greatly honor our annual Midsummer Gala. Many influential members of our society are eager to meet the young prodigy who has taken the dueling world by storm. Harry had penned a polite response, while I'm deeply honored by your invitation, I must respectfully decline. At this time, I'm focusing on my studies and personal development. I look forward to engaging more with the wizarding community after I've completed my education at Hogwarts. Then the Daily Prophet headlines struck with articles of stories about him from any sources they could get. One particularly sensational article had proclaimed, "The boy who duels, Harry Potter's secret training revealed." The article went on to speculate wildly about Harry's upbringing and magical education, with theories ranging from secret tutoring by Merlin's ghost to time travel. Thankfully not many people knew about the reasons for his strained relationship with his parents and Dumbledore, but that did not stop them from making up theories. Harry rarely went out in public and the reporters did not know his home location so he was not mobbed. The whole week, however, had been a bit overwhelming. Thankfully, the Quidditch World Cup fever had redirected much of the attention away from him. An owl's screech interrupted his thoughts. Harry recognized the ministry seal on the letter it carried. His owl results had arrived. With a deep breath, he unfolded the parchment, a smile spreading across his face as he read. 12 owls, all outstanding. He had only given 9 owls last year but the ministry had decided to club his 3 owls which he had given to claim his emancipation when he was 11 years old and made the certificate altogether. The result was nothing unexpected so he quietly folded it away. 12 was the maximum number of owls one could give in Wizarding Britain. For more, Harry would have needed to go to the ICW to take the exams which Harry did not think was worth the time or effort. Marks and grades don't usually matter much in the real world. They are just for show and might give you a push in the beginning stages of your career but in the end, it is your skill that matters the most. That evening, Sirius and Amelia returned earlier than usual, their faces alight with anticipation. It looked like they got the memo and the owl results had been announced. Well? Sirius asked, practically bouncing on his heels. Don't keep us in suspense, pup. How did you do? Harry couldn't help but grin at his godfather's enthusiasm. 12 owls, all outstanding. Amelia's usually stern face broke into a wide smile. Congratulations, Harry. That's absolutely fantastic. Sirius let out a whoop of joy, pulling Harry into a bear hug. I knew you could do it. This calls for a celebration. Creaker, break out the finest fire whiskey we have. Sirius, Amelia chided, though her eyes twinkled with amusement, Harry's still underage. Butterbeer for the kids then, Sirius amended with a wink. But the adults are definitely having fire whiskey. Before Harry knew it, he found himself back at Black Castle, surrounded by family and friends in an impromptu party. As he looked around at the smiling faces, he felt a pang of bittersweetness. With Voldemort's return looming on the horizon, moments like these would become increasingly rare. Nut for your thoughts? Emma asked, appearing at Harry's side with a glass of butterbeer. Harry smiled, accepting the drink. Just thinking about how after a lot of twists and turns my life has turned great. I want it to be like this forever. Emma's expression softened. Life has a way of throwing challenges at us, Harry. But haven't you been working hard to gain strength so that you can live your life the way you want it to be? The future is always uncertain, but remember you have us, and we can face all the hurdles together. Harry nodded, his resolve strengthening. You're right. No dark wizard is going to keep me from living a good life with my family. I have overcome so much already, and whatever comes next, I will face it head on. The next day brought a flurry of owls from friends, all sharing their own owl successes. Plans were quickly made to meet in Diagon Alley. Can you believe it? Roger Davies exclaimed as they strolled down the bustling street. Newt's classes begin next year. It's all happening so fast. Cedric nodded in agreement. And from the cryptic hints my dad is giving me all summer, something interesting is going to happen at Hogwarts. He keeps talking about international magical cooperation and a chance for eternal glory. It's going to be an exciting year. Harry said, knowing what the secret was. As if the previous years weren't exciting enough. I was hoping for a quiet year, but we don't always get what we wish for. But let's focus on today, shall we? I hear Florian Fortescue has a new flavor we simply must try. As they indulged in ice cream and laughter, Harry allowed himself to relax and enjoy the moment. The worries of the future could wait for now, he wanted to savor these last few days of carefree joy with his friends. We'll all meet up at the World Cup, right? Roger asked as they prepared to part ways. Everyone nodded enthusiastically. Wouldn't miss it for the world, Harry agreed. It's not every day we get to see the best Quidditch players in the world face off. As the day of the Quidditch World Cup final approached, excitement reached a fever pitch. Harry could feel the anticipation building, not just for the match, but for the challenges he knew lay ahead. Although Harry did not remember the exact specifics, he knew there was going to be a Death Eater attack during the World Cup, and he needed to prepare for a battle where he might be outnumbered. However, Harry refused to let these worries dominate his thoughts. His current strength gave him the confidence to not live in fear of everything. The Death Eaters would regret causing trouble under his watch.
Thanks for listening.